Chapter 656. Putting away the satellite phone, Lu Qing examined the three corpses again, trying to find the source of their strangeness. Among them, the one-eyed man had been hit head-on by Universe Phantom. All that was left of him was charred black, and his original appearance couldn't be discerned. The molten and twisted metal might have come from his clothes, his pockets, or something else. As for the blonde man, he was reduced to a pile of flesh and blood, making him easier to investigate than the other man who only had half his body left. Pressing his thumb, Lu Qing used the technique of Ice Spirit Holy Light to form a crystalline longsword. He stabbed it into the flesh and blood in front of him. He poked and stirred, cooperating with the senses of God above my head. His mind was calm and clear. Suddenly, he discovered tiny, silver-white particles hidden in the corpses. They shone with a faint metallic glow and covered every inch of the flesh. Nanomachines? Lu Qing thought of what he had seen at the military base. He muttered to himself, half surprised and half guessing. From there, he considered more possibilities. Since the other party had this level of technology, the three enemies with numbers as code names might have other devices on them. Perhaps their deaths would be detected in another way. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Lu Qing surveyed his surroundings and retreated to the factory ruins 20 to 30 meters away. He hid behind a half-collapsed wall with reinforced steel protruding from it. He withdrew his chi and blood, activated his secret technique, and leaned against the wall like an invisible person. Using the reflections of the shattered glass and the vision of God above my head, he monitored the battlefield. He suspected that the people from the mysterious organization already knew about the incident here and would most likely come to investigate. Therefore, he didn't want his presence to cause the other party to retreat and cut off the clues. In the information provided by the military, there was no mention of North Harbor Base. If Ku's grandparents arrived first, he would give them a heads-up and ask them to hide as well. A few minutes later, Lu Qing's heart skipped a beat. He felt the atmosphere around him become heavier. He cautiously retracted his spirit and no longer looked down from above. Instead, he observed the entrance of the factory ruins through the broken glass. After counting silently for a few seconds, he saw a blurry figure from the corner of his eyes. It was a figure wearing a green and white baseball uniform. The man with the number 16 emblazoned on his back walked closer step by step in his high-top black combat boots. He stood in front of the few remaining pieces of the one-eyed man's body. Laser beams gathered in his eyes on his well-defined, deeply wrinkled but expressionless face. Lu Qing didn't wait any longer, in case there were more accidents. He concealed his breath and distorted the light around him. He took a step forward cautiously, intending to launch an attack. However, just as he moved, the brown-haired man immediately turned sideways and faced the half-collapsed building. What a strong sensing ability. It's like he's equipped with a radar. Lu Qing narrowed his eyes, straightened his back, and walked out with an imposing manner. Since he couldn't launch a surprise attack, then he would have to attack head-on. The person with the number 16 on his back suddenly saw a young man in navy blue clothes appear from the darkness. His hands hung down naturally, and his eyes were dark and deep. His footsteps were neither too big nor too small, neither too light nor too heavy, as though he was stepping on his own heart. 1 step, 2 steps. Number 16 felt his surroundings become more distant and blurry. He felt as though he had been forcefully pulled out of this world and was floating alone and helplessly in the boundless starry sky. His surroundings were as dark as a curtain, dotted with diamond-like stars. It was dreamy and grand, making all living things seem exceptionally small. His opponent stood in the middle, his navy blue eyes deep and profound, as though he was a god who controlled the universe and looked down on all living things. Around him, a scarlet-red halo first appeared, flying in an ellipse with the longest trajectory. Immediately after, a faint purple halo shone above his head, a golden halo hung behind his head, and a blazing white and light blue halo formed a circle, sometimes on the left and sometimes on the right. It wasn't until the sense of danger hit him that number 16 came to his senses. He realized that he was at a disadvantage in the mental battle and the exchange of auras. As a result, he missed the best opportunity to attack when his opponent wasn't ready. He didn't have emotions, but that didn't mean he didn't rely on his mental strength or other methods. His eyes unwavering, number 16 raised his hands coldly and opened every pore on his palms. Pure and dazzling light gushed out. The light gathered in an instant and blasted out with a boom. Like two long dragons crossing the darkness, they opened their mouths and swallowed the stars. At the same time, number 16 swung his waist and back, dodging to Lu Cheng's side with a bang. He lifted his thigh, hurriedly swung his knee, and shook his ankle. He forcefully kicked out a crescent-shaped blade light, silently slashing at his opponent. He had completely displayed the strength of a terror-grade expert. In his eyes, Lu Cheng seemed to have anticipated this. With a simple sidestep, he dodged the laser cannons, causing them to fall into the ruins of the factory behind him. They pierced through layers of half-collapsed walls, causing the tottering buildings to collapse with a boom. With this as a backdrop, his opponent shook his right arm and turned it into an iron whip, ruthlessly lashing out at him. The blazing white, faint purple, and other fireballs danced and gathered, smashing down as well. He didn't care about the crescent. A dark green light flashed in number 16's eyes. He bent his waist and bounced to the side. As though there were springs under his feet, he flew higher and higher. Seeing this, Lu Cheng abruptly stomped his feet into the ground. This caused his knees to straighten and his back to rotate rapidly. Like a spear, he pressed his tail and turned his whipping right arm into an upward swing, causing the gathered 5 flames to rise gradually. Attracted by the heavy virokana, the crescent moon distorted and collapsed. When it landed on Lu Cheng's body, it only managed to cut through the layer of crystalline ice. The 5 flames shot out rapidly and chased after number 16 into the air. Rumble. A huge blazing white fireball bloomed in the air, spraying flowing magma and brilliant fireworks in all directions. The intense light engulfed number 16 in an instant, and the terrifying sound shattered the remaining glass on San Jose Street. Strong winds swept and danced, sending sparks flying. Number 16's figure appeared high up in the air. His clothes were in tatters, his pants turned to ash, and his body was charred and dented. If he hadn't used the beam shield at the last moment and teleported to avoid the core of the explosion, he would have been severely injured at the very least. At this very moment, number 16 was hovering in the air, showing no signs of descending. One of his abilities was flight. The flight of a physical invulnerability expert. Lu Cheng had locked onto him and suppressed him mentally, so he couldn't immediately rise into the air. He was afraid that the slightest movement would cause him to be struck by lightning. He could only take the initiative to attack and create an opportunity. This way, he would be in a position where he had no chance of losing and could also exhaust his opponent's terrifying killer move. He didn't expect his opponent to control the 9 rotations of 5 flames so well that he could change his move halfway. Number 16 pressed his right hand against his left palm and extended it forward. A dark green light flashed in his eyes as he locked onto Lu Cheng's figure. Mortar. Modified. Boom. A blazing white beam shot out from his left palm and blasted towards Lu Cheng on the ground. Boom. 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 One after another, the blazing white beams shot out, covering the surrounding area as though they were plowing the ground. Lu Cheng used the mesmerizing snow steps and the all-seeing god to change directions and avoid the cannon fire. At the same time, he stirred up a strong wind to blow the blazing white beams off their tracks. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Rumble rumble rumble. While Lu Cheng was dodging, he wasn't idling either. Occasionally, he would flick his fingers and shoot out beams of cold light into the air. Other times, he would quickly condense crimson fireballs to bombard his opponent. Number 16 was like a fighter jet, either soaring, circling, or coming to a sudden stop to avoid his opponent's counterattack. The two were in a deadlock for a while. Suddenly, number 16 condensed a laser beam and shot it from the device in his eyes towards Lu Cheng at lightning speed. However, Lu Cheng already had a premonition of danger. Before the laser beam was released, he shifted his position and allowed the 2 beams of green light to shoot into the ground, leaving deep holes. Number 16 knew that the commotion just now would attract attention. Seeing that he couldn't take down his opponent in a hurry, he decided to retreat and flew out of the ruins of the factory. Without the suppression of the cannon fire, Lu Qing glanced at the half-broken pillar in the ruins. He wanted to use the momentum to soar into the air and use the formation formula to keep his opponent here. At that moment, number 16 saw a middle-aged woman with a long sword in her hand. Her hair was tied up in a bun and she looked graceful as she approached him. Immediately after, a meteor streaked across the sky, illuminating the darkness. With a long tail of light, it smashed into his body and filled his vision. A strong suction force came from it and slowed down number 16's sudden stop and change of direction. Bam! Lu Qing ran at high speed and jumped up. Kicking off the top of the half-broken pillar, he leaped into the air and formed a hand seal. Formation. P.S. Looking for recommendation tickets and monthly tickets on Monday. Chapter 657. Number 16 was already having trouble changing directions due to the strong attractive force. Now that the formation was on him, he froze in midair and could no longer avoid the brilliant meteor with a tail of light. All he could do was drive every cell in his body to produce a repulsive force that converged into an indistinct light shield. With a whoosh, the meteor grew larger and larger. Its surface burned with flames due to the high-speed friction with the atmosphere, bursting into an even more dazzling light. Only when it was within reach and was about to touch number 16's body did number 16's pupils reflect the man and the sword. Boom! The meteor swallowed the enemy in its brilliance. The flames rolled back and bloomed layer by layer like a blooming red lotus, beautiful but dangerous. The sixth move of the fighting sect, Flame Meteor. Whoosh! 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 Rays of light scattered. Number 16 fell from the sky in a sorry state. His body was covered with sword marks and many bloody holes. Before he could rise again, a sword light rushed over and slashed wildly. 7 luminary star, Do Ning. Puff, puff, puff. The sound of a blunt knife cutting through flesh rang out continuously. The densely packed sounds made one's teeth ache. Number 16, who had not yet adjusted himself, was unable to block all of the attacks with his fists, kicks, and laser cannons. He was forcibly knocked back and almost split into several pieces. Do Ning's attacks had just eased when number 16 felt the ground shake. Lu Cheng's powerful figure appeared in his eyes. His fists were full of fire and each move was heavy and terrifying. Bam! 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 Lu Cheng whipped his arm, hit him with short bursts, stabbed him with the great spear, and bombarded him with cannon punches. He completely suppressed number 16 and lit his opponent like a torch. Bam! Bam! After a series of moves, he bent his body and slid half a step forward to avoid number 16's block. Then he straightened his back and punched upwards as if he was going to soar into the sky. Bam! He punched number 16's chest and abdomen, shattering his remaining light shield and taking him to the sky. Lu Cheng took advantage of number 16's dizziness to reach out his left hand and grab him. Then he twisted his legs and wrapped his right arm to imprison all of number 16's joints and freeze his body. Straightening his back and exploding his flame force, Lu Cheng changed his direction and pressed his opponent down like a human-shaped meteorite. Rumble. The ground cracked and a crater was formed. Number 16 was lying in the middle, foaming at the mouth. His body twitched and twitched, but there was not a single piece of intact skin to be found. He also lacked the bones to support him to stand up. The lean Ji Jianzhang approached. He watched as Lu Cheng stood up and pointed his long sword at number 16's forehead. As long as he exerted his strength, the enemy would definitely be smashed into pieces and die without a complete corpse. It's him. Taking a closer look, Ji Jianzhang said in surprise. Senior, do you know him? Lu Cheng asked in surprise. Ji Jianzhang frowned slightly and said in a deep voice, he's an American and has been roaming this area since 30 or 40 years ago. He's famous for his flying ability. It's said that only he can hit people, and no one can hit him. But if you walk by the river often, how can you not wet your shoes? How many bombers had been shot down? I heard that he was seriously injured a few years ago and died. I didn't expect him to still be alive. He doesn't seem to recognize me. His eyes don't seem right. Did he lose his memory? His state of being alive is a little strange. Do Ning, with her hair in a high bun and graceful bun, sensed that something was wrong. Lu Qing quickly recounted the problems he discovered and the results of the interrogation. Starting from number 16's nationality, he connected the dots and had a rough idea. Ji Jianzhang and Do Ning looked at each other and said in unison, "Artificial weapons project?" Ji Jianzhang frowned and said, "That's not right. I've never heard of them having a base in Tignes. It's a little different from the artificial weapons project I know." Do Ning nodded in agreement. Listening to the conversation between Ku's grandpa and grandma and feeling their tacit understanding, Lu Qing suddenly felt that he was unnecessary here. He pondered for a few seconds and said, "Maybe it's a branch research, a new secret base. Yeah, no matter what, he's in their hands." Do Ning's tone turned stern as she looked at Ji Jianzhang. "Let's find out the exact location of that North Harbor base." Number 16 was at the terror grade. His willpower was firm, his mind was strong, and he seemed to have been brainwashed. Lu Qing and the Ji family elders took turns to use their secret arts to slap him. It took them a good few minutes to break him down. Once he broke down, number 16, who had lost his past experience, could no longer develop the will of a physical invulnerability expert. With the blonde man as an example, Lu Qing didn't dare to ask directly. Instead, he shared his concerns with Ji Jianzhang and Do Ning. "That's easy." Ji Jianzhang pointed his sword downwards and plunged it into number 16's throat. However, it only went in a little and didn't damage the trachea or arteries. BZZT, BZZT, BZZT. As yin and yang circulated, a magnetic field enveloped the surroundings, interfering and distorting most of the signal sources in number 16's body. "Where's North Harbor Base?" asked Lu Qing in English with a Connecticut accent. Number 16's nerve signals seemed to be in disarray. After a moment of silence, he answered, "Underneath the Hakko Machinery Corporation." Corporation. A joint research project between America and Japan. Ji Jianzhang came to a realization. Following that, Lu Qing asked about the whole story. North Harbor Base's secret research had achieved a breakthrough and was in urgent need of dangerous grade materials to verify the results. There weren't many such experts, but there weren't many of them. Within a short period of time, the base couldn't find any and their preparations were about to be scrapped. Therefore, the person in charge sent number 4, 5, and 6 to fight in the underground boxing ring and challenge arena masters to see if they could lure out a lone dangerous grade expert. 2 days later, they encountered Lin, Quebec. After the arena battle ended, number 16 secretly knocked him out and took him away. After he was sent back to the base, due to the lack of accurate information, they assumed that this dangerous grade young man didn't have a powerful background. Therefore, they happily put Lin K on the experiment table. Also, according to number 16, there were still number 17 and 18 in the base who were more powerful than him. Ji Jianzhang retracted his sword with his right hand, extended his left palm, and grabbed number 16 out of thin air. He sighed in self-reproach. "We were all prejudiced by first impressions and thought that it was the revenge of the human trafficking organization. In the end, it was just a coincidence. No wonder we couldn't find any clues and let K. suffer." As he sighed, he looked at Lu Qing and nodded gently. "It's all thanks to you. Let's go." "I want to see what they're researching," said Do Ning with a cold face, no longer as elegant as usual. Lu Qing didn't say much. He followed behind the old couple and left the factory ruins on the outskirts of the city. They arrived at Tignes North Harbor. This place was backed by a large river and was an important node for the transportation of many resources. Even in the middle of the night, lights and neon lights could be seen. It was a stark contrast to most of the areas that lacked electricity. The corporation that number 16 mentioned was located near the warehouse area. It was a small 3-story building on the outside, but underground was a large experimental area. Those who disguised themselves as security guards were all elite special forces soldiers who had seen blood. However, in front of 3 physical invulnerability experts, they couldn't resist at all. Before they could even react, they were crushed by Lu Cheng's simplified army formula. Snot and tears streamed down their faces as they didn't dare to make a sound. Without wasting time dealing with this group of people, Ji Jianzhang found the entrance to the underground. Lifting number 16, he opened the door with his iris. As soon as the door opened a crack, Ji Jianzhang leaped into the room like a shooting star. Along the way, he swung his sword at one guard after another. Dou Ning held her sword and stood at the side, guarding against any accidents. Lu Cheng, who seemed redundant, was at the back. He bulged his muscles and destroyed part of the door's mechanism, making it unable to close again. He was afraid that he would be trapped underground and get hit by a huge bomb in an enclosed space. Thump. Ji Jianzhang stopped at the end of the tunnel. The guard who was first hit by his sword had just fallen to the ground. Dou Ning left one alive to destroy his mental state. She asked if there were any experiments tonight and where they would be held. Currently, the focus of the North Harbor base was on the matter number 16 mentioned. Wherever there were experiments, Lin Ke would be there. Turning into the inner path of the base, the Ji family's 2 elders attacked together and separately. They didn't let a single obstacle delay their journey, nor did they give the other party a chance to trigger the alarm. As the sword light moved further and further away, the figures gradually fell. Lu Cheng, who was following behind them, felt like he was watching a movie. Along the way, Ji Jianzhang used number 16 to complete all the doors that required identity verification. 3 minutes later, they finally saw the main laboratory and the rigid mighty ones guarding outside. They wore armbands with 8 and 10 written on them. You go in first. While Ji Jianzhang was transmitting his voice to Lu Cheng, he threw number 16 at the door to attract the attention of the guards. Whoosh! Sword light flashed. 2 shooting stars whizzed out and slashed at number 8 and 10, completely enveloping them. Lu Cheng, who had been ready, pounced at the door, grabbed number 16 in midair, and sent him to the verification area. Beep, beep, beep. The heavy doors separated. Lowering his waist and tilting his shoulder, he rammed into the door, not giving the person inside a chance to react. Bam! A hole appeared in the metal door, and the alarm rang throughout the laboratory. As soon as Lu Cheng entered, his ice heart immediately shone on his surroundings. He locked onto Lin Ke, who was pinned to the metal bed. His face was contorted in pain, and his body was full of instruments. Parts of his body were exposed to the white bones and bloody flesh. Next to him was a man holding a cutting knife and wearing a lab uniform. Anger rose in Lu Cheng's heart. He arched his back, lowered his hands, and shook his wrists to the sides. A cluster of light purple flames flew close to the ground, silently igniting the devices and the bodies, causing them to scream in agony. On the other side, a cold light moved forward, freezing several lab members from the soles of their feet to their heads, turning them into ice sculptures. Bam! Lu Cheng stirred up a strong gust of wind and used ground shrink to rush to Lin Ke's side. Only then did he secretly heave a sigh of relief. The remaining lab members were scared out of their wits and hurriedly retreated. Ji Jianzhang and Dou Ning took care of number 8 and 10 outside and entered one after another. Suddenly, a mellow voice rang out. Looks like they've made a mistake and offended someone they shouldn't have. Lu Cheng followed the voice and saw a woman with snow-white skin and shoulder-length black hair. She was sitting leisurely on a lab table, wearing a black casual jacket with decorative numbers on it. 18. Noticing the intruder's gaze, the woman didn't show any signs of rigidity. She smiled in fluent Chinese and said, "Luckily, he's still alive. Mistakes can still be made up for. Gentlemen, it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. Why don't we discuss how we should apologize and make amends? P.S. Looking for recommendation and monthly votes on Monday." Chapter 658. Compared to number 16, number 18 was more lively and natural. She smiled before speaking and didn't look like one of the test subjects at all. If they had met elsewhere, Lu Qing would definitely have noticed the strangeness and uniqueness of number 4, number 6, and even number 16. However, he would most likely have treated number 18 as a normal physical invulnerability expert. Perhaps this is why number 16 thinks she's stronger. With an elder by his side, Lu Qing didn't act on his own accord despite his anger. Instead, he thought of other problems to maintain his ice heart. Hearing number 18's words, the lean and elegant Ji Jianzhang looked deeply at her. He glanced at Lin Ke from the corner of his eye and laughed. I haven't traveled in Jianghu for many years. Looks like everyone in this war-torn zone has forgotten the name of the heaven-leaning sword. Let's have a discussion. We'll consider how to apologize and compensate you after this. As he spoke, his smile faded and his tone turned sinister. At the last word, he flicked the tip of his sword. Clang! A dragon's roar soared into the sky and reverberated throughout the entire main laboratory. It shook the ears of the remaining researchers in protective gear and immediately plunged them into a world of silence. The sound of the sword entered their ears and a radiance erupted. Thin rays of light first sprang up like a fountain and then sprinkled down, covering number 18. It had a strong suction force that made it difficult for the enemy to move. Some even wanted to throw themselves into the trap like moths to a flame. The Yin-Yang magnetic ray sword. The sword cuts the body and the magnetic field destroys the instrument. This was the most effective way to deal with the products of man-made weapons projects. However, number 18's thoughts and reactions were like those of a normal physical invulnerability expert. She wasn't affected at all. The fact that her previous suggestion was rebutted made her squint her eyes. She was no different from an ordinary person when she hid her anger in the stars. Her eyes sparkled and she instantly regained her composure. She didn't force herself to move. Instead, she placed her hands on the edge of the long experiment table and leaned back. Her dangling right leg followed the suction force and swung upwards. The blazing light formed a knife and slashed towards the core of the sword or a fountain. But the moment Ji Jianzhang drew his sword, or even the moment he spoke, Dou Ning had already made her preparations. She took a step forward, squatted down, and stabbed the ancient longsword that shone with clear moonlight into the ground, spreading out a heavy and gloomy glow. The surrounding concrete immediately cracked, as if it had been weathered for a long time and was extremely dry. The remaining experimental personnel who were shocked by the sword's sound had their feet stuck to the ground, trembling non-stop. Their skin dried up inch by inch, as if their blood and water were being sucked away. The dim light was either heavy or light, causing the gravitational force in this area to be unbalanced. It pulled number 18's movement in the opposite direction, causing her razor-like right foot to be somewhat sluggish. Her cooperation with Ji Jianzhang's sword was flawless, showing the tacit understanding that had been settled for decades. The eighth move of the fighting sect, Withered Desolation, Silent Earth. There were 3 stages to this killer move. First, it would extract the surrounding water, including the ground and the living beings that were attached to it. Next, it would simulate a certain degree of gravity to disturb and influence the enemy. Finally, it would trigger an earthquake at a locked location and release the gathered energy. These 3 stages could be used separately and only one of them could be used. After mastering the sequence, it could be changed according to one's will. Clang! 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 The light of the razor split apart the rain of swords, and accurately blocked Ji Jianzhang's blade. However, due to the pull, it was a little slower. Many of the lights escaped the net and were continuously slashed by them. If number 18 hadn't formed a shield in time to resist the damage, she would have been covered in cuts and bruises. Clang! Dou Ning straightened her back and stood up. She took the opportunity to pull out her sword. From left to right, she slashed at her opponent lightly, but the suction force was obvious. Beside her, the experimental personnel wearing protective suits fell to the ground like dominoes. Their faces were filled with fear, like specially made dried corpses. Ji Jinjiang's wrist shook. His long sword was half-hooked. From right to left, it was so heavy that it felt like he was carrying 1,000 kilograms of weight. However, it felt like he was pushing someone. One sucking and one repulsing, one pulling and one pushing. The two sword techniques complemented each other and enveloped number 18. Lu Qing stood beside the metal bed and didn't interfere rashly. A battle between physical and vulnerability experts took up an extraordinary amount of space and range. If one didn't have long practice of cooperation and forcefully helped, it would affect the footwork and moves of the two seniors. 1 + 2 might be less than 2. Under such circumstances, the best way to work together was to take turns attacking the enemy, one after another. It was just like his experience with Renli. Unfortunately, the two of them had been in the martial arts world together for many years and had a tacit understanding of each other. They didn't leave any gaps for others to interfere. It feels like an unnecessary onlooker. The thought flashed through his mind, but he didn't relax at all. Since number 18 is here, what about number 17? What about number 17, whom number 16 thought was stronger than him? Is he also in the base and rushing over after hearing the commotion? Or is he hiding somewhere, waiting for a chance to deal a fatal blow? With such concerns hanging at the back of his mind, Lu Qing completely gave up on the idea of attacking number 18. While blocking the aftermath of the battle between physical and vulnerability experts to prevent the immobile Lin Ke from being accidentally injured, he used the ice heart to reflect his surroundings and check on his brother-in-law's condition. Lin Ke's pain eased, and Lu Cheng's figure was reflected in his slightly cloudy eyes. He was stunned for 2 seconds before he remembered who he was. His tense muscles relaxed, and his eyelids drooped, covering that fleeting moment of weakness. When he opened his eyes again, his emotions had returned to normal. 2 sparks of light appeared at the bottom of the dark pool. His dry lips moved with difficulty, and his throat bobbed up and down a few times. However, he couldn't make a sound. From the shape of his mouth, he was clearly saying, Thank you." Lu Qing felt a lump in his throat. He hurriedly looked for a way to deactivate the various devices. He wasn't proficient in such matters, so he didn't dare to do it right away. He was afraid that he would destroy some important device and cause his brother-in-law's condition to worsen. He glanced at the area facing away from the battlefield and glanced at the researchers who had turned into ice sculptures. With a press of his right hand, an unbreakable ice wall formed beside the metal bed to block the aftermath of the battle between physical and vulnerability experts. With a leap, Lu Qing pounced to the side of a researcher who seemed to be the leader. With his left palm burning with faint purple flames, he slapped the other party's shoulder. Drip, drip, drip. The ice wall melted. The researcher's face turned green as he trembled. Unfortunately, what awaited him wasn't Yen Yuan, but a simplified army formula. The researcher broke down instantly. He was dragged to the metal bed by Lu Cheng for a consultation. He spilled everything he knew, including the number of one-night stands he had. Pressing and pulling, Lu Cheng quickly deactivated the devices on Lin Ke's body. Just as he was done, he was startled. He turned around and looked at the door. A figure was approaching with a trail of light. Noticing Lu Cheng's gaze, he paused. His blonde hair was parted in the middle, and his pupils were crimson red as if they were burning. He wore a white t-shirt with the number 17 on it and a black jacket. His hands, which were placed in front of him, were surrounded by fiery snakes. They weren't damaged at all. It's the 17th. Lu Qing felt relieved, but he had more worries. The main laboratory wasn't small, but it wasn't big either. He had to take care of his brother-in-law, who didn't have any defensive abilities. He wouldn't be able to fight to his heart's content. Looking at number 17, he wasn't an easy opponent to deal with. Amidst his thoughts, Lu Qing quickly made a decision. He leaned back and pressed with his palm, sealing Lin Ke in layers of ice and leaving some breathing holes. This way, as long as Grandpa Ku and Grandma Ku could get rid of number 18 as soon as possible, the impact on brother-in-law would be under control. He had to choose the lesser of two evils. With Lu Cheng's move, number 17 moved as well. He crouched like a leopard on the hunt and pounced. He clenched his fists and placed them beside him, covered in golden red flames. With a push, Lu Qing also rushed forward, his right fist burning with a faint purple flame, tightly wrapped around it. Under the control of the god above his head, the anger in his heart leaked out little by little, adding fuel to the Lord Emperor's purple flames. Boom! The fists collided and an explosion sounded. The researchers, who were paralyzed like mud, were sent flying and slammed into the wall. Their bones were broken, and blood spurted from their mouths. It was obvious they wouldn't survive. Lu Qing didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy for this kind of people who experimented on innocent and involuntary people. In fact, he even wanted to burn them to the ground. Faint purple and golden red flames splashed, igniting parts of the equipment and activating the smoke alarms. The newest fire extinguishing material scattered. Amidst the smoke and fire, number 17 and Lu Cheng's fists reverberated at the same time. One retreated with his left shoulder and advanced with his right, bending his elbow and smashing down. The other retracted his right fist and advanced with his left, still covered in purple flames. In an instant, Lu Qing opened his fist and extended his 5 fingers. His palm firmly held number 17's elbow. Number 17's elbow suddenly sank. He swung his forearm and used the force to punch. The golden red flame spun and erupted. Just as he was about to move, Lu Cheng's palm on number 17's elbow suddenly shook, dispersing the force of his opponent's punch. He shook number 17 a few steps back and let the purple flames flow over. At the same time, he tilted his head slightly and dodged most of the golden red flames. The remaining flames didn't leave a single burn mark on his face. It was as though he was playing with his cat. Number 17 shook his forearm and let the purple flames fall to the ground. They softened the ground and left a black mark. Both of them were experts at controlling fire. P.S. Looking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. Chapter 659. Shaking off the purple flames, number 17 took a step forward, raised his right leg, and lashed out at Lu Cheng's head. It was fast and ferocious, like the assault of fire. Lu Qing lowered his body and stepped out diagonally. While avoiding the kick, he took advantage of the fact that number 17 was standing on one leg with his right hand hanging down. With a hook and shake, he threw out a cluster of light purple flames that slithered close to the ground. It burned silently with hidden power. Even a master of fire control would be burned and melted by it. This was the manifestation of ice burning, the essence of the 5th move of the fire sect, burning mountain, evaporating lake. Number 17 missed with his kick. Exerting strength from his waist, he leaped into the air, causing the cluster of light purple flames to rush to the side of the wall. As it soared, it softened and warped the upright silver-white metal. Bending his back in midair, number 17 released himself like a titan spring. He straightened his body abruptly and lightly kicked out with his left leg. The kick seemed casual and natural, but it was just right. It was so heavy that Lu Qing couldn't help but sway forward to receive it. Creak. Lu Qing circulated his qi and blood, stimulating his body. Using the simplified fighting formula, he expanded his muscles and resisted the suction force with his explosive strength. He threw a punch. Bam! His fist landed squarely on the sole of number 17's foot, causing the black military boots to flutter like butterflies. They either fell into the flames or drifted to the ground. Number 17 used the force to bounce back. Before he could regain his footing, he saw Lu Qing pouncing at him at lightning speed. His right fist was unusually heavy and covered in purple flames. It was like the majestic hand of a legendary emperor that could encompass heaven and earth. Simplified attainment formula. His heart stirred slightly. Number 17's eyes glowed green. The light quickly gathered and shot at Lu Cheng's head. Laser beam cannon. You're fast, but I'm faster. This was a high-tech device that only number 16, number 17, and number 18 could use. It was inseparable from their own unique abilities. Even if the other codenames obtained it, they wouldn't be able to activate it. Even these 3 terror-grade mighty ones couldn't use it consecutively. Their bodies and equipment couldn't take it if they used it too often. Lu Qing threw a punch, but he suddenly sensed danger. He collapsed his shoulder, pulled his arm, and forcefully changed the direction of his punch to a downward smash, causing his body to fall forward. Whoosh! The 2 beams of green light hit the opposite silver-white wall and directly penetrated it, leaving a hole. Before Lu Qing could straighten his body, number 17 rushed forward, swinging his right arm and punching downwards with his clenched fist. With 2 bangs, he continuously hammered down with both hands. The golden red flames bared their fangs and brandished their claws, choosing their targets to devour. Lu Qing lowered his head and swung his arms upwards to block. Rumble. Rumble. After 2 punches, number 17 lowered his right arm and raised his fist from the ground towards Lu Qing's chin. It was as if he was going to send Lu Qing flying into the air. Lu Qing quickly shrunk his shoulders and folded his arms in front of his body to cover his face. He was in a boxing defensive stance. Bang! A ball of fire burst out. Lu Qing leaned back and took a step back. Number 17 took a step forward. As soon as his left foot stepped on the ground without a shoe and sock, flames immediately shot out from under his body. The flames shot up into the air as if they were burning a cannon. Bang! At the critical moment, Lu Qing ignited part of the flame force in his body. He changed directions in midair and moved horizontally. The pillar of fire that seemed to be shouting at the heavens brushed past him and only burned his right leg. His navy blue trousers turned into ash. The woolen pants that Yan Zhika had mentioned vanished, leaving only red skin. If the flames had burned a little longer, even Lu Qing would have been burned. Number 17, who had completed his combo, didn't waste the advantage he had just accumulated. He ignited the flame force in several parts of his body. This igniting was like a flickering match thrown into a car's fuel tank. Number 17 instantly exploded, throwing a total of 8 punches at Lu Qing. This was in the time it took a normal physical invulnerability expert to throw 2 punches. Bang! 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 Lu Qing couldn't hold on by himself. He could only assume a complete defensive stance, protecting the vital parts of his upper body. The rest of his body formed ice walls and continued to condense. Crack! 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 It was hard to tell whether it was the sound of crystals shattering or bones cracking. He finally survived number 17's most violent round of attacks. Many of his body's surface were charred and sunken. After 8 punches, number 17 took a step back, caught his breath, and punched out his right fist again. The golden red flames sang joyfully, as if they had transformed into an undying bird that only existed in myths and legends. It ferociously pecked at its opponent, and its beak was number 17's fist. At this moment, Lu Qing, who had been in a complete defensive stance but hadn't forgotten to prepare a counterattack, endured the pain. Taking advantage of his opponent's retreat, he exhaled and shouted, "Formation." He didn't make any hand seals. Instead, he used his visualization, voice, and mind to perform a half-simplified version to save time. The air instantly froze as if it had turned into an invisible wall. The golden red immortal bird transformed from number 17's fist was about to fly out, but it was imprisoned in place. It bit and burned furiously, trying its best to destroy the wall. The half-simplified version of the formation formula wasn't as effective as the complete version. It lasted only half a breath before it was smashed and burned by Lu Qing's fist. However, Lu Qing had already bent his back, dodging the remaining force of the immortal bird fist. At the same time, the deep, dark universe and dazzling stars appeared around him. This move was both a counterattack and a counterattack. It was brilliant. Following which, he crossed his hands and swung them at number 17 from below like a sledgehammer. He straightened his body and stared at number 17 with his eyes fixed. Number 17 clenched his left fist and hammered it down. The moment he came into contact with Lu Qing's hands, his body seemed to have become weightless. He took advantage of the momentum and fell back, half blocking and half parrying. He had just taken a step back when the dreamy, boundless starry sky enveloped him, turning the surroundings dark and cold with layers of ice. Number 17 was sealed in the transparent coffin and couldn't move for a moment. The stars whizzed over like rocket launchers, smashing into the ice layer one after another. They first blasted open the crystal and then flew toward number 17 one after another. Boom! 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 The densely packed explosions almost merged into one, and the resulting shockwaves shattered more than half of the ice wall around Lynn Quebec. Number 17's figure appeared amidst the scattered flames and smoke. He had a mixture of red and white liquid at the corner of his mouth. His clothes were tattered and riddled with holes. His flesh was charred black. With the defense of his shield and his control of flames, his injuries weren't too serious. However, in his eyes, Liu Cheng's surroundings were already swirling with faint purple, light blue, and scarlet. Furthermore, they were still condensing into gold and white. Bam! Liu Cheng took a step forward and struck out with his palm. Number 17 was about to block with his fist, dodge the condensation, and counterattack. However, just as he raised his arm, a green light flashed in his eyes as though he had sensed something. He forcibly used Flame Leap and moved horizontally with a bang. The change in direction was too steep, causing many of the wounds on number 17's body to split open and bleed. It's a pity he didn't take the bait and block the lament of the Ice Queen head-on. Liu Cheng changed his mind and continued attacking his enemy. At this moment, number 18 let out a scream of fear. Then, Liu Cheng's eyes were filled with the radiance of the sword. Whoosh! 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 As the sword flashed, the sound of flesh being cut rang out continuously. Ji Jianzhang and Dou Ning had worked together for a long time before finally killing number 18. If it weren't for their tacit cooperation, number 18 would have had a chance to escape from the base if it were two other physical invulnerability experts, as long as they weren't at the level of Warrior Sage or Dragon King. When the sound entered his ears, number 17 frowned. He made a prompt decision and shot out a violent and terrifying reddish-gold fireball. His target wasn't Liu Cheng, but Lin Ke. As soon as the fireball flew, he ran for the door without looking back. His figure flashed continuously as he retreated. Liu Cheng's pupils shrank. He didn't dare to risk Lin Ke, whose ice wall was severely damaged. He immediately changed directions and blocked in front of the metal bed with his ice spirit holy light. Poof! Boom! The reddish-gold fireball was first pierced and then exploded. The sound was deafening, and the shockwave was like a tsunami. However, Liu Cheng blocked it all. Bam! 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 At this moment, number 17's figure had long disappeared from the door. No one knew where he went. Seeing Liu Cheng's slightly regretful expression, Ji Jianzhang sheathed his sword and said, "Well done. This old man was a little impulsive just now. I should have moved first. Let's call it a day. The direct attacker and the leader of the base have already been killed. He's just a subject. Don't worry too much. Don't go too far. After all, Ku is still in America. So in the world of physical invulnerability experts, this isn't considered going too far." Liu Cheng glanced at the dead subjects and number 18. The corner of his mouth twitched. But then again, it made sense. The Americans and Japanese were in the wrong, and what they did was against human nature. What they did was the kind that would be condemned in speech and in writing. Giving them some face wasn't considered too harsh. If anyone dared to make things difficult for Ku, did they really think that their family could withstand the revenge of a physical invulnerability expert who had been waiting for them for 10 years? The borders were so long that it was easy to find a place to sneak in. Even if there was a physical invulnerability expert at home, they couldn't keep their entire family tied to their waist at all times. Once they shed all pretense of cordiality, both sides would suffer huge losses. Therefore, physical invulnerability experts knew their limits. Of course, lunatics like Dark Knight Bat were an exception. Find some survivors and copy the information here. Then, destroy the base. First, we'll have something on them. Second, we'll be able to prevent from being harmed by the experiments. When the time comes, we'll be able to follow the clues. Dou Ning said to Lu Cheng, half sighing and half benevolent. She was imparting her experience in dealing with similar situations. Okay. Lu Cheng heaved a sigh of relief and turned to another laboratory. Boom! Huge flames rose up, and the Hoko Machinery Corporation completely collapsed. Number 17, whose blonde hair was parted in the middle, was hiding in the crowd and watching the scene in a daze. Suddenly, he burst into laughter. He laughed so hard that tears rolled down his cheeks. Free, free. He kept muttering. In exchange, the surrounding people looked at him as though he was crazy. P.S. Previously, there were two 74s, so this is 76s. Please recommend and vote. Chapter 660. The plane flew above the clouds, sometimes stable, sometimes bumpy, as it headed towards the Southern Expressway of China. Lin K was fixed on a flat bed with an auxiliary life support system plugged in. He fell into a deep sleep due to extreme fatigue after a long period of tension and wasn't affected by his surroundings at all. Lu Cheng, Ji Jianzhang, Dou Ning, and a few other military personnel sat nearby, flipping through thick documents marked as secret. These were printed from the information they brought out from North Harbor Base. According to the description, the underground laboratory had existed for a long time and was a product of history. It started as an air raid shelter and was later expanded to its current state. 2 years ago, it was remodeled and welcomed a joint research team from America and Japan. This was a branch of the Artificial Weapons Project. The main focus was changed from technological devices to genetic induction. In this aspect, Japan had done a lot of preliminary research and accumulated plenty of experience. It had been many years since the United States of America started the Artificial Weapons Project. After many failed attempts, they gradually found a direction and got on the right track. They had, number 1, that could be used in actual combat. After that, they improved it to number 15. Even though each number corresponded to only one experimental subject, there were actually many failed products buried behind them. Even those that succeeded had problems due to various reasons. More than half of them were removed from the sequence, providing experience and lessons for subsequent improvements. So far, the experimental subjects that were still in service were only number 4, number 5, number 6, number 8, number 10, number 14, and number 15. After Lu Cheng and the others wiped out them, only number 14 and number 15 in the American headquarters were spared. Among them, number 15 was a mature product in all aspects. This could allow the dangerous level experts in the United States to have a second life. As long as they did not die on the spot, they could undergo the modification with a relatively high success rate. The only problem was that they would become rigid and mechanical, forgetting most of their memories. They would only retain their instincts and simulate normal behavior patterns according to the implanted chip. During this process, for various reasons, every test subject had a built-in blocking program to prevent them from going out of control. The blonde number 5 triggered this and suffered a genetic breakdown. After accumulating enough danger-grade experiments, the scientists of the Artificial Weapons Project set their sights on the terror grade. Number 16, who was rumored to be dead due to severe brain injuries and was in a vegetative state, entered their sights. A year later, number 16 came back to life. Even without the implantation of a chip, he could fight on his own. It was almost the same as when he was alive. However, his daily actions were a mess, and he still had to rely on simulations. With such a successful experience, the Artificial Weapon Project had a higher goal. It was to create products that were no different from normal physical and vulnerability experts and could think independently. Of course, brainwashing and control were necessary. For this reason, they reduced the application of nanotechnology and instead cooperated with the Japanese. Starting from a genetic induction, the North Harbor base was put into use under this background. In less than a year, number 17, who was already adept at controlling fire, was born under the guidance and cloning of the genes of many fire element terror-level experts. There were no problems with his thinking and actions, except that he appeared to be more reclusive and introverted. Combined with the high-tech equipment in his body, his special physical and vulnerability level combat strength was even more surprising. He also showed some potential for growth. The experimenters called him a master of fire control who could catch up to the Dragon King. Before number 17, most of the test subjects were on the verge of death. The few healthy captives all failed without exception. Number 17's success gave the Japanese physical and vulnerability expert in charge of the base hope to improve herself. After ample preparation, she accepted a limited modification and was a great success. However, her personality was twisted, and she started to like calling herself number 18. It was because of this background that she had to apologize and make up for it in a leader's tone at that critical juncture. Recently, the North Harbor base's experiment seemed to have made a breakthrough. Before this, the standard of the test subjects depended on their original level. Modification could at most increase their combat strength slightly, and that was under the condition that there were many flaws. This time, the researchers found a better way to use the genes of the strong to make the weak undergo a qualitative change. Therefore, they urgently needed live subjects to verify it. Across the world, there were indeed many inhuman experts. However, they were not cabbages. How could there be a test subject on the verge of death or willing to appear in such a hurry? Therefore, Lin K, an inhuman with no background adventuring in the war-torn zones, was targeted. The person in charge of this was number 16. He was assigned number 4, number 5, and number 6. The follow-up verification of the information would be done by number 17, who was more independent and often active in the war-torn zones. It's a pity that the battle destroyed the main laboratory. A lot of data was lost. Also, judging from K.'s situation, their breakthrough can't be considered a success, said Ji Jianzhang with a sigh after flipping through the data. Lin K's experiment hadn't reached the most dangerous stage yet. This data is enough. It will be of great help to our related research. The military personnel agreed with Ji Jianzhang's words, but didn't dare to say it out loud. He flipped through the files and changed the topic. The core researchers of the base and number 18 are all dead. The main laboratory was also destroyed. I'm afraid no one knows how number 17 used the external control of the blocking program. What a pity, otherwise, the military would have another physical and vulnerability expert. Lu Qing was startled for a moment and then said thoughtfully, he pondered and said, number 17 participated in the battle for 2 reasons. First, number 18 was there. Second, he was afraid that the researchers weren't all dead and that the damage to the main laboratory wasn't severe enough. At least before confirming that number 18 couldn't escape, he didn't dare to slack off or join in the siege. If he did, he might be dragged down with them. It would be easy for number 18 to kill him. Maybe. Do Ning nodded approvingly. If number 17 was as described in the data and had the ability to think like a normal human, at this moment, the plane jolted. Lu Qing swallowed the words he wanted to say. He looked out of the window and saw the ground peeking through the thin clouds. He looked at the dilapidated miniature city and suddenly recalled what he had seen and heard in the war-torn zones over the past 2 days. He couldn't help but open his mouth and say, when will peace be restored here? The overall environment was filled with despair in the war-torn zones. It seemed impossible to change it. Lu Qing was also affected by such an atmosphere. He felt that doing anything would be useless. That was why he chose to be a bystander and not interfere in matters that were within the local rules. Ji Jianzhang turned to look out of the window. He smiled, half self-deprecatingly and half emotionally. None of the forces here are righteous. The military personnel beside him felt awkward. They looked at the data and admired the scenery. Even a forbidden mighty one can't change such a situation, said Ji Jianzhang. We can only hope that after such a long period of war, people's minds have calmed down. Even the forces and mighty ones who have set up a separatist regime are willing to compromise. Look at Zhelangang. With our help, it's focused on infrastructure and order. It has attracted a lot of refugees and is developing very quickly. If this continues, it will become a benchmark in the war-torn areas and attract other forces to imitate it. When the time comes, after a certain amount of reshuffling, there might be many similar peace points. Step by step, things will get better, a military personnel emphasized. At this moment, Lu Qing, Ji Jianzhang, and Dou Ning felt Lin Kei's body move. They looked at him and saw his eyelids trembling slightly before he slowly opened them. "How are you feeling?" Dou Ning leaned over and asked concernedly. "Grandma, Grandpa." Lin Kei greeted them twice. His personal style was obvious. "Not bad." Ji Jianzhang stood up and stood in front of the bed, consoling his grandson. "You've made great progress in refining your root pulp and gained some strange abilities. After you go back and rest for a while, you'll be able to reach the peak of the inhuman stage. At that time, you can fight in the title matches and seek inspiration. Maybe you can make the great leap earlier than expected. If you really can't do it, you can come back here and train in real battles." Ji Jianzhang stood up in front of the bed and consoled his grandson. Lin Kei didn't look away. His pupils darkened a little. He said with restraint but determination, "I want to come every year. Even after reaching physical invulnerability." "Why do you want to train in actual combat when you're already at physical invulnerability?" At first, Lu Cheng was stunned. Then, he understood his brother-in-law's true intentions. He replied tacitly, "There are other mighty ones following that human trafficking organization. Don't worry." Lin Kei closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again and said calmly, "I'll still come." "He'll still come?" "He'll still come after suffering so much. He'll help those he can help. He'll help those who can see the suffering." A few lines suddenly appeared in Lu Cheng's mind. "Face as cold as ice, heart as bodhisattva, he'll do what he knows is impossible." Maybe this is the complete version of his brother-in-law, a stubborn boy. Influenced by him, Lu Qing shook off the feeling of helplessness. He smiled and said, "When I accept military missions in the future, I'll try my best to choose this place. If I meet them, I'll do what I can." The plane soared through the clouds. The curve of the southern part of China was getting closer and closer. Chapter 661. When the plane landed at the military base on the outskirts of Huaqing, it was close to noon. The sun hung high in the sky. Lu Qing stepped out of the cabin door and was blinded by the bright sunlight. He felt like there was gold everywhere. He had lunch with the Ji couple and watched them leave with Lin Quebec. Then, he took the jeep from the base to a nearby intersection. He saw his assistant Amen, driver Zhao Zhenhua, and silver-gray MPV waiting there. Although only 2 days had passed, when Lu Qing sat in his usual seat, leaning against the soft and comfortable leather backrest and looking at the small bar with luxurious decorations, it felt like a lifetime had passed. This is how life should be. He closed his eyes and sighed. Amen saw that he didn't want to talk, so she sat diagonally across from him. She put her phone on silent mode and communicated with him via text. The car left the overpass and entered the bustling commercial district. Lu Qing suddenly opened his eyes and turned to look at the street outside the dark glass. Half an hour had passed, but there were still deliverymen in different uniforms on the road, carrying lunch boxes. They looked busy and orderly under the scorching sun. A new shop had opened on the side of the road. There was a long line at the entrance, attracting many onlookers. Business seemed to be booming. This is what life should be like. Such things happen in war-torn zones as well, but they're all for the relief ration, not for the delicacies or additional desires. Recalling what he had seen and heard yesterday, Lu Qing suddenly felt a surge of emotions. Amen followed his line of sight and looked in that direction. She said dutifully, "This shop. They spent money to hire a lot of people to line up. Their model is very successful. They've opened quite a number of shops. Hired extras." Lu Qing swallowed back the sentiments he was feeling. How am I supposed to express my emotions? Almond retracted her gaze and saw that her boss looked a little weird. She quickly added, I heard it from a friend who specializes in this business. After hearing that, Lu Qing suddenly shook his head and laughed out loud. His body and mind seemed to relax. In the afternoon in Connecticut, the wind was biting cold and the ground was frozen. Yenjika had just finished class when she received a call from Lu Qing. He told her that Lin Kei had been rescued and that he was fine. He might even have good fortune in the future. Lu Qing didn't mention the details over the phone. He only said that he would describe it in person over the Christmas holidays. The girl understood the meaning of the song and did not ask further. She put the textbook into her orange-red sling bag and walked out of the classroom. She only felt that the sky was blue and the air was cool. The clouds were high and far, making people feel relaxed. There was an indescribable pleasure and leisure. She strolled along the picturesque campus road. Suddenly, she saw a bouquet of red roses and smelled the faint fragrance of flowers. Alfred, who had eyes as blue as the sea, smiled brightly. Sophia, may I have the honor of inviting you to dinner? He and Yenjika had the same instructor, but they were not in the same group. His short blonde hair was flying in the wind, and he looked handsome. I'm sorry. Yenjika answered directly. I've asked around. You only go home every night and have no other plans. Sophia, they all think that you're old-fashioned and conservative, a girl without any charm, but I can see the beauty that you're hiding. But that's not the main point. What strongly attracts me is your soul, your wisdom, the way you make people consciously listen to you every time you speak, and the way you always surprise the teachers and everyone. Alfred could not help but express his surging emotions. Sophia was an American name that Yenjika gave herself. That's your business. It has nothing to do with me. Yenjika laughed. Then she waved her left hand. See? I have a boyfriend. No, I have a husband. This is our wedding ring. Oh, that's impossible. Alfred was shocked. I won't lie to others about this. Yenjika shook her head and planned to walk past him. Alfred was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly shouted, I won't give up. Even if we are married, we have the freedom to pursue love and the right to break up peacefully. Yenjika paused, turned around and looked at him deeply. Then she took out her phone and opened the recorder. She slowed down and said, Can you hear what I'm saying? Yes. Alfred didn't know why. Obviously, my ears didn't lose their function. Very good. Yenjika nodded slightly. Then I officially reject you. I'll tell you seriously that if you do anything like this again, I'll consider it as harassment. When the time comes, I'll inform my lawyer and apply for a restraining order. If the first time doesn't work, I'll do it twice. If the second time doesn't work, I'll do it 3 times. Trust me, I have the ability to take it. If you doubt my determination, I can call my lawyer right now. Alfred was stunned. He didn't understand why a normal pursuit would turn out like this. Sophia, don't you think you're overreacting? He said, puzzled and frightened. Yenjika pursed her lips and smiled. Overreacting now can save a lot of trouble in the future. After all, some people don't understand rejection. I hope you don't waste our time. Otherwise, I can only sue you for harassment. After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave. But at this time, she saw a big rock that was dug out and was about to be thrown away. So she smiled and politely said, Also, I'm a martial artist. Before she finished, she took a step to the side and used force concentration. With a bang, she pulled out her right leg. The instep of her foot was straight in her boots. Bam! Smoke and dust rose. The rock cracked into many pieces of different sizes. Alfred stared blankly, his eyes full of fear. Yenjika pulled back her leg and walked steadily but slowly to the door. She saw Aunt Du, who had driven over to meet her. She opened the door and sat in the passenger seat. She wasn't in a hurry to put on her seatbelt. Instead, she bent down and rubbed her right foot painfully. She hadn't been practicing for the past few months. Her body had become delicate. That kick just now was so painful that she almost lost her composure. She took off her boots and socks. Seeing the red and swollen instep, she was so wronged that she almost burst into tears. Picking up her phone, Yenjika sent a resentful message to Lu Cheng. "It's all your fault." When Lu Cheng got the signal and saw the message, he was totally confused and bewildered. What did I do wrong? After returning from the war-torn zones and resuming his normal life, Lu Cheng continued to plan for Ku's winter break. As his ferry had a last-minute arrangement to attend the European Economic Summit Forum, which lasted for 5 days, he was wondering if he should get a visa so that they could meet in advance and travel. It just so happened that he was in the mastering period and didn't register for the Battle of the King's main competition. He wasn't in the top professional competition yet, so he had some free time. Thinking about this, Lu Cheng got out of the SUV and entered the club like he did the past few days. At this moment, Amon's phone began to vibrate. A call came in. After she picked it up, she nodded a few times and said, "Mr. Lu, Empress Luo wants you to go to her office." That sounds formal. Lu Cheng's sharp senses told him that something was amiss. He and Ning Zidong had each other's phone number and WeChat and would occasionally contact each other. If there was an emergency, there was no need for an assistant. Puzzled, he took the elevator to the 5th floor. As soon as he stepped out, he immediately felt the heavy atmosphere. This is the effect of a physical invulnerability, mighty one. As he pondered, Lu Cheng knocked on Ning Zidong's office door. Ning Zidong's tired voice sounded from the other side. "Come in." Lu Cheng pushed the door open and entered, only to see this peerless senior gently rubbing her temples. "Is something wrong?" he asked bluntly. "Everything was normal yesterday." Ning Zidong smiled bitterly and said, "Longzhen just informed me that he won't be renewing his contract after it expires in January. He's going to join Haiyuan Club, which just got promoted to the top professional competition." "Why?" Lu Cheng asked instinctively. "Isn't this too sudden?" Even though Optimus Prime Longzhen often challenged Dragon King, and was always beaten to a pulp, he seemed to be enjoying it. Longzhen is also a proud man. He wants to prove that he's not the one who basks in glory under Dragon King, that he's not the mighty one who's always ranked second. This isn't something that can be changed with a few titles. Therefore, he's joining Haiyuan and officially leading the team to challenge Longhu as an opponent. He's been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Ning Zidong replied helplessly, "Haiyuan also has some military background, so there's no problem with the procedures." Although this was foreseeable, and as long as Longzhen was still unconvinced and competitive, this would happen sooner or later, did it have to happen so quickly and suddenly? He thought of Wu Maoyan, the current chief of Haiyuan Club, his master's old friend, and the self-proclaimed empty nest elder. He thought of Witch Qianhui, Cheetah Li Yuanqi, and banished immortal Li Xiaoyuan, who joined them before graduating from university. With Longzhen, they wouldn't be weak anymore. Ning Zidong lifted her cup and took a sip. She looked at Lu Cheng and said, "I originally wanted to wait until you've accumulated a wealth of experience in title battles and have a better grasp of all aspects before letting you gradually get used to the top professional competition. Looks like I can't wait that long." Chapter 662. Without waiting for Lu Cheng's reply, Ning Zidong explained in more detail. "You've seen the club's matches. Dragon King, Longzhen, and I are the main force. I'm getting on in years, so I have to learn to choose and conserve my energy in preparation for a title or two every year. Hee. This year, I participated in the Battle of the Masters and Battle of the Kings. I rarely participate in consecutive matches in the professional matches. Most of the time, I rotate with Lu Yan. At the age of 40 and above, except for a few freaks like Dong Baxian and Lu Yongyuan, the top physical invulnerability experts would rationally give up on many matches and spend half a year or even a year accumulating their strength to fight for the honor of being second best in martial arts. Only in this way would they have a greater chance of carving a bloody path out of a group of formidable opponents. But even so, in the end, they would often fall in front of the Dragon King or the Warrior Sage, falling short of success. According to statistics, since the start of the legendary twins era, at most 2 titles would be lost every year. Most of the time, it would be 1. On rare occasions, there would be no titles at all. This was even when Chen Qitao and Qian Donglu were both heavily injured. My silly disciple, Guojia, usually only plays in the less important matches in the professional matches or takes over when someone is injured. She can barely cope with her current level. If it were some other forces, she could be the main force. But our goal is to be number 1 in the world. Ning Zidong continued, half heartbroken and half self-deprecating. I'm not saying that her hard work in training is useless, and I'm not saying that there's something wrong with her obsession with martial arts. She might be able to achieve rank 1 in a decade or so, but the problem is imminent. At this point, Ning Zidong took a deep look at Lu Cheng and sighed. On the path of martial arts, talent is really important. Don't be fooled by the fact that the Dragon King is often described as having perversely strict self-discipline. However, his talent is only bad when compared to martial sages. He is no different from me and most of the top-notch experts who have obtained titles. In addition to his unrivaled desire to win and his frightening speed, he is already comparable to martial sages. Her foolish disciple might need 10 years to advance from rank 2 to rank 1. By that time, she would be in her 40s. As for the person in front of her, he might need 3 years, 2 years, or even sooner to enter the ranks of the contenders for the title. This was the gap, a gap that could not be made up for in a lifetime. I've even mastered the physical invulnerability chapter of my martial arts. Isn't Longzhen's contract expiring in January? You can participate in the remaining 3 matches? Ning Zidong chuckled. Do you think Dragon King will let him fight again? Don't you want to prove your position? I, the Dragon King, will show you how insignificant you are. As long as the Dragon King is here, victory is here. TSK. That doesn't sound like something the Dragon King would say. Lu Qing pointed out. Although this was very much in line with the Dragon King's style, and even perfectly aligned with his psychological activities, with the Dragon King's personality and his domineering CEO demeanor, it was impossible for him to say such words. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't be bothered. What right do you have to make me say such things? Haha. Ning Zidong let out a dry laugh. I understand. Anyway, Longzhen won't be part of the next 3 matches. You have to be prepared to be the main force. You can't always rely on me and Lu Yan, those 2 old men, to carry on, right? Especially the match this weekend. Lu Yan probably won't be able to fight. He's injured in the Battle of the Kings. He can force himself to fight, but it won't be good. This weekend. Aren't we going north to Hadong to challenge Shangqing sect? Lu Qing recalled. And it was a crucial match to determine the champion of this year's top professional competition. The Dragon King sure is conceited, it's fine. Yin Yan is injured, and the rest are second pin, replied Ning Zidong with a smile. Ning Zidong replied with a smile. However, since we have a problem, she may also fight with injuries. Under normal circumstances, Shangqing sect's main force was warrior sage Qian Donglu, sect leader Daoist who had won 3 titles, and Daoist Yun Yan, who was a strong contender for the titles. Dragon King Chen Qitao, Empress Luo, Ning Zidong, and Longzhen were all part of the twin prides with 2 superclass members. They were the hot favorites for the top professional competition every year. In the second category were Daxing Temple, Yanzhao League, Shushan Study, and Xinghai Club. They were mainly fighting for the 3rd place, but in the past decade, they had each made it into the top 2 and even won the glory of the top. They were not to be underestimated. Lu Qing nodded slowly. I understand. I'll prepare well. He had to go through the information and videos of the Shangqing sect mighty ones. Pulling himself together, Lu Qing left the office. Just as he was about to turn into his room, he saw Longzhen walking along the corridor towards the elevator. He was over 1 meters tall, with bronze skin and a shiny scalp. Wearing a loose-fitting martial arts suit, his mere presence gave off a strong sense of oppression. At this moment, he looked relaxed and lively. It was as though he had returned to nature after being in a cage for a long time. Lu Qing didn't expect to meet him directly. He felt a little awkward and didn't know what to say or what kind of attitude to present. Morning. Longzhen laughed heartily. After greeting him, he looked down at Lu Qing and said leisurely, "Wait until 5 years later. I believe you will make the same choice as me." Huh? Lu Qing was a little confused. At this moment, Longzhen stepped into the elevator, turned his huge body, and said in an ethereal tone, "Because we will always be proud." The door of the sedan chair closed slowly, blocking Lu Qing's line of sight. He was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, he remembered something his master once said: the best way to worship a martial artist was to catch up with him, face him, and defeat him. Looking at how Longzhen enjoyed being tortured, perhaps he really worshipped the Dragon King. In his heart, sighing, Lu Qing returned to his room and turned on his computer. There were videos of warrior sage Qian Dongluo's recent matches. At this moment, he suddenly remembered his original plan of traveling to Europe for a few days. Looks like it's over. Luckily I didn't mention it to Ku. Otherwise, she would be disappointed. I don't have to get a visa for now. I can get it done earlier. Maybe in the future, I won't have to go through so much trouble. As his thoughts raced, Lu Qing sent a message to Aman and asked her to help him get visas for various countries in Europe. Europe was currently a loose alliance. It wasn't possible to get a single visa to go to different countries. While Lu Qing was training hard, Aman went to some consulates in Huaqing. Those that didn't have consulates here, she found one online. After the information was submitted, the obvious description of physical invulnerability triggered the danger alarm and gave the consular officers a shock. They didn't dare to act on their own accord. After confirming that Lu Qing from the Longhu Club had applied, they reported it to their respective security departments. In an office in Niu country, a black-haired, blue-eyed man wearing a general's insignia glanced at the name and ordered his assistant firmly, "Reject. Reject his visa." "Why?" the assistant blurted out blankly. "Isn't this too casual? Should I check carefully?" Although he's a crown-level mighty one, it wasn't as if there hadn't been such people entering the country before. The black-haired, blue-eyed general leaned back and said, "Do you still remember the death of Dark Knight Bat?" "Yes. 3 mighty ones died in succession. Satha was besieged by Dark Knight Bat and the rest. We don't know who did the rest. Back then, there weren't any satellites monitoring this area, so we didn't take any precious photos," replied the assistant thoughtfully. "Lieutenant General Aman has confirmed that Lu Qing is a confirmed mighty one in the area who chased the mummy all the way to Kukang. He's quite suspicious," said the general calmly. "But he's only a suspect. Mighty ones of this level can cross the desert in a few hours if they want to. Even those in Nile's capital, Dika, are suspicious," said the assistant, providing his opinion. Recently, the secret cooperation between the United States and Japan was destroyed. The Crown level number 16 and number 18 died there. They made a mistake and incurred the wrath of the Hua nation. There's no need to protest. However, Lu Qing was involved in this matter, said the general. "I know about this. He's probably just a support." The assistant was still puzzled. The general was getting impatient. "Don't you get it? There are always crown-level mighty ones dying around Lu Qing. At least 2 at a time. We're not like America. We only have a few. Do you want them to all die? But this is just a coincidence, right? You can't use misfortune or disaster as a reason to reject his visa," argued the assistant, feeling a headache coming on. "At crown level, misfortune isn't fake. We have to treat it seriously. Who knows if it's another strange ability?" said the general, tapping the table lightly. "Do you understand?" "Yes." "Then what reason should we use to reject his visa or not?" asked the assistant, seeking his superior's opinion. The general pondered for a moment. "According to the John Wilberg Convention." "You're kidding, right?" blurted the assistant, stunned. "No." The general shook his head. "Of course, you have to use its full name." Amen received a reply 2 days later. She glanced at Lu Qing beside her and pursed her lips. She didn't know what to say. "What's the matter?" asked Lu Qing, opening his eyes. "Ox country has rejected your visa," replied Amen softly. "Reason?" asked Lu Qing casually, frowning. Amen hesitated for a few seconds. "John Wilberg Convention on the Restriction of High-Danger Weapons. P.S. I went to see the doctor and he said it's still in the early stages, so it's not that serious. The treatment plan he gave me is exactly the same as one of my friends in the comments. Take hormones and neurotrophic drugs first, then get the face pierced a few days later. If the situation doesn't worsen and I'm getting better, then there's no need for the treatment. Yeah, I did get a few injections today, on my hands, feet, and stomach, to relax muscles and promote blood circulation. He also reminded me to rest well and not stay up late. So, I'm going to take a leave of absence today and adjust my work and rest schedule together with the previous one. Once I'm fully recovered, the chapters starting tomorrow will not be affected until I get the injections." Chapter 663. What kind of bullsh*t reason is this? Lu Qing was dumbfounded for a moment. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he got the gist of it. As expected of the Nyo country, the pinnacle of bureaucratic art. "I wonder if Sir Humphrey's coffin lid has been pressed down." Amen took a quick glance at Lu Qing and quickly added, "But most countries have approved your visa. Apart from Nyo country, only Gaul and Germany have rejected it. Then there's no problem." Lu Qing nodded slowly and sent the joke to Yen Jika. "What kind of dangerous weapon is this? As long as I can fly to Europe, no matter which country I'm in, I'll be able to get into the rest. I can even walk across the small trench between Nyo country and the European mainland on the water." After this incident came to an end, Lu Qing immersed himself in more rigorous training. Every day, he would find time to spar with the club's trainers who had awakened supernatural abilities such as electromagnetism and let them simulate the fighting style of Enchanting sect. The upcoming professional match would, to a certain extent, determine the world's #1 of the year. On the day of Yen Jika's flight to Broodale, Lu Qing was wiping his sweat and leaving the training ground when he saw Empress Luo standing outside in a navy blue outfit. "Take a shower and tidy up. We're leaving tonight." This outstanding senior beauty instructed with a faint smile. "It's already the weekend? Is this the day I'm going north to Hudong to challenge Enchanting sect?" Lu Qing, who was engrossed in training, suddenly felt that a day in the mountains was 1,000 years in the world. "Okay." He collected his thoughts and answered solemnly. After washing off the stickiness of his body and soothing his mental fatigue, he packed his simple luggage and went to the Physical Invulnerability restaurant for dinner. There was no need to go home. The clothes he had left in the club room were enough for his rotation. At 6:30, Lu Qing led Amen to the entrance and saw a coaster minibus. When he got on the carriage, he swept his gaze across the interior of the carriage and took in the situation inside. Dragon King Chen Chitao was sitting in the first row by the window, leaning against the backrest with his eyes closed. He looked like he was taking a nap, expressionless and silent. His current assistant, Huang Zhenghong, who was dressed in a suit and leather shoes, sat opposite him. He didn't get too close, as if he couldn't bear the natural pressure. Lu Yan, who was also a part-time coach, was seated in the second last row. If one were to look closely at his handsome face, they would be able to see some wrinkles and signs of old age. Coupled with his grizzled hair, he fully displayed the charm of an old man. He maintained his usual serious expression and was whispering something to his assistant, who wore half-rimmed glasses and looked like a lawyer. Despite Lu Yan's unsmiling face, Lu Qing, who had been paying attention to the Longhu Club for many years, knew very well how excited he could be after defeating a strong opponent. He might even do some provocative things, such as rushing to the enemy's seat to celebrate. This wasn't an immature behavior that only happened when he was young. This had happened twice already this year. Ning Zitong, who had changed into a long dress, and her disciple, Guojia, sat in the middle. One of them was talking about feminine topics, while the other was nodding along nonchalantly. Their assistants were scattered around them, each doing their own thing. Lu Qing nodded in acknowledgement and casually chose an empty seat by the window. Amen and Guojia's assistant, Wang Yueshi, sat together and started chatting in low voices. A few minutes later, the bus started moving out of the city and onto the highway, heading north. Although they were heading north, Hedong wasn't too far north. Not only was it not comparable to the Guanwei League, it didn't even cross the Yangtze River and was just adjacent to Guangnan. However, according to the customs of the people of Huaqing, the north of Huaqing was called the north. It was because of this that they didn't take the high-speed rail and instead traveled by themselves. The two drivers took turns and arrived at Sky Thunder Mountain, where the Shangqing sect was located, in the middle of the night. After resting for a few hours at the hotel they had booked, Lu Qing and the rest began their adaptability training. Due to the impending battle, they didn't engage in any group battles. After a day of adjustment, they boarded the bus again at 2 in the afternoon and headed up the winding mountain road. The road was full of twists and turns, pine forests, and valleys dotted with thin snow. On one side was a cliff, and on the other was a bottomless abyss. The terrain was dangerous and the environment was serene. After passing the Wansong Hill, there were 8 Shangqing sect disciples in blue robes guarding the hill. In ancient times, this place was called Sword Dispelling Cliff. All visitors had to leave behind their weapons before they could continue up the hill. This wasn't much of a restriction for martial artists who were proficient in martial arts. It was just a matter of courtesy. The 8 disciples stood to the left and right, bowing and greeting the members of the Longhu Club. Ning Zitong retracted her gaze from the window and flipped through the newspaper that her assistant had bought. She lamented and complained, "The newspapers these days are getting worse and worse. Other than advertisements, there's still more advertisements." Back in the day, a duel like this would be a full-page feature. From the setup of the home team, the recent battles of both sides, their respective performances, all sorts of sensational and motivational content, there was everything. The writing was good too. Now, sigh, there's still a feature, but one look and you can tell that it's just half-hearted and half-hearted. It's the era of self-media now. Many web portals are slacking off. They don't plan much themselves and are mainly reposting other people's work, let alone newspapers. Sitting behind Ning Zitong, Lu Qing held his phone and said with a smile. As for the comments online, most of them were about the Dragon King being too conceited, overconfident, and impulsive. At times like this, it was only right to let Longjin shine. The other plans were too dangerous and uncertain. So much has changed in the past 10 years. Ning Zitong sighed. She changed the topic and said, "Shangqing sect requested not to have spectators for this duel. I'm afraid they're up to something." In other words, to improve their home field advantage, replied Lu Yen, unsurprised. Ever since Dragon King, Chen Qitao, boarded the car, his eyes were closed. He didn't reveal any of his spiritual will, as though he was a clay puppet. Guojia, on the other hand, seized the time to study the videos of the mighty ones from Shangqing sect. She didn't care if she had the chance to fight. Coaster went around the sword dispelling cliff, passed through the 5 immortal crutches, and arrived at the car park outside the Shangqing sect. The Longhu Club team, led by Chen Qitao, went down in a single file. The reporters, who could only watch, took photos and videos like crazy. After entering the Shangqing sect, Amen and the other assistants stopped and were led away for tea by the receptionist. The few physical and vulnerability experts continued up. They passed through the courtyard, stepped on the stone steps, and reached the peak. This place got its name from being struck by lightning all year round. There wasn't a hint of snow, and it was barren except for rocks. As they approached, the ring on his finger was disturbed by a magnetic field and showed signs of restlessness. Thunder and lightning fell from the sky, generating magnetism. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that there were now 9 thick electric poles on the previously barren mountaintop. High-voltage power lines connected the poles from below. In the middle of the high-voltage power line stood a white-robed Taoist with a crown on his head. He had delicate features, and the corners of his clothes fluttered in the strong wind. He was the warrior sage, Qian Donglu. Dragon King, Chen Qitao's half-closed eyes suddenly opened. He looked over and made eye contact with the other party. Suddenly, lightning flashed high up in the sky. It was as if it had struck an invisible tree, burning it up out of thin air. With a faint purple flame, it fell to the ground with crackling sounds, turning into small snakes that flowed away, leaving behind only scorch marks. Retracting his gaze, Chen Qitao didn't take another look. He took the lead and walked into the distance. There were a few futons by the edge of the cliff. Those were the guest team seats. All of this had the simple charm of a battle from a few hundred years ago. However, the thick electric poles and high-voltage power lines that separated the sky ruined the feeling. So they're going to use the high-voltage power. Ning Zitong smiled in realization. There was a solemn look on her face. Lu Qing nodded at Peng Liyun and sat down cross-legged. He heard Coach Lu Yen say, "The warrior sage is planning to be the first to battle. Although we have a higher chance of winning if we take him down first and let you, Dragon King, take him on, I'm afraid he'll be unstoppable with today's setup. When the time comes, he'll carry the momentum of his accumulated victories with him. Hence, it's still better for you to take the lead." "Just right," Chen Qitao nodded slightly. There seemed to be a raging purple flame burning in his eyes. Lu Yen turned to Lu Qing and suddenly asked, "Are you confident?" "Huh?" Lu Qing didn't react immediately. "What kind of question is that?" Lu Yen took a step forward, looked straight into his eyes, and said in a deep voice, "If you're not confident and feel fearful, I'll do it myself." Lu Qing immediately straightened his back and answered firmly, "Yes. Yes. P.S. In the process of adjusting my schedule, this chapter has fewer words." Chapter 664. Lu Yen and Lu Qing stared at each other for a dozen seconds before retracting their gazes. "Then go show them your confidence." After saying that, he looked around and said, "I'm sorry. We don't know if Shangqing sect will send Taoist Yun Yan, but since they've set up such a formation, they must be planning to break through with brute force. The strongest will break through, the second strongest will penetrate, and the weaker one will finish the job. Logically speaking, this is the most reliable way for us to deal with them. However, our strength is similar to theirs to begin with, and they have a slight advantage over us. Plus, they've put in so much effort to set up this home ground advantage. If we do this step by step, we won't have much of a chance of winning. Once we fall behind, we'll fall further and further behind until the end, and it'll be hard to turn the tables. That's why we need to make some changes. Dragon King, hold off Warrior Sage and completely break his spirit, or at least push him to his limits. Lu Qing, you'll go second. Don't be careless. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even at his limits, Warrior Sage still has the ability to defeat you. You have to do your best to take him down, then drag the match out as long as possible to wear down. Lu Yen glanced at the paper in his hand. Wear down Taoist Wu Guang. I have more confidence in you in this aspect. While he was setting up, Dragon King Chen Qitao's eyes were deep and dignified, like a volcano waiting to erupt from the depths of the earth. He didn't comment on, wear down his spirit or push him to his limits. Before Lu Qing and Ning Zitong could speak, Lu Yen continued, when this match ends, as long as we can drag it out long enough, Shangqing sect's preparations will be destroyed. The home ground advantage will solidify, and the impact on us will be minimized. Having said that, he turned to look at Empress Luo. If you can finish off Taoist Wu Guang quickly, you'll have an advantage over the injured Yun Yan, Ming He, Peng Liyun, and the rest. As for how much of an advantage you have, and whether it can offset the home ground advantage, it'll depend on what Lu Qing can do, and how quickly you can finish off. Taoist Wuguang. Only by accumulating strength step by step will we have a chance of winning. If we make the slightest mistake, everything will be over. We're all physical and vulnerability experts with plenty of battle experience. I'm sure you know what to do. Go all out and fight for every single step. After doing all this, Lu Yen personally handed over the name list to the referees of the same level and found out who the third main player of the Shangqing sect was. It was not the injured superclass Yun Yan, nor was it the longtime second-class Ming He and the others. It was the newly promoted Peng Liyun. He now had a nice nickname, Immortal Outside the Clouds. Beyond the Clouds originated from his name, but it was also because he was often in a daze, his mind wandering beyond the heavens. Peng Liyun is a little strange, Lu Yen said as he returned to the cliff. Maybe there's something surprising about him. Ning Zidong put away her usual expression and said with a calm smile. At this moment, she felt like she was looking down on the heroes of the world. She was once the #1 physical and vulnerability expert. In those years, she wasn't called Empress Luo, but Ghost King. Ghost King Ning Zidong. Taoist priest, made another breakthrough? Lu Qing tried to recall the messages he had received in the group chat recently, but he didn't remember Peng Liyun mentioning anything like that. This kid has a lock on his mouth. While Lu Qing was lost in his thoughts, the referee walked to the center of the arena, avoiding a spot where the high-voltage wires could fall. He signaled that the match was about to begin. Dragon King Chen Qitao, who had been silent since the start of the match, stood up abruptly. The air around him surged upward, turning red and spraying everywhere. At this moment, it was as though a volcano had erupted, and the temperature around him rose steadily. He didn't punch, kick, or flick his wrist. Just the act of standing up was already so powerful. Seeing this, the warrior sage, Qian Donglu, who was still standing on the high-voltage power line, smiled casually. He didn't react. Instead, he put his hands behind his back. His white Taoist robe was spotless, as if it had been washed over and over again. Dragon King approached step by step, and the referee kept retreating. When both parties were facing each other, he raised his right hand and announced, "Conversation time starts now." Qian Donglu looked down at Chen Qitao from above. His tone was natural and light, as though he was overjoyed. "We haven't fought for more than half a year, right?" "After 5 months, Dragon King replied curtly. "In the past 6 months, I've made some discoveries and created 3 new moves. I'd like to invite you to evaluate them," Qian Donglu said leisurely with a smile on his face. Upon hearing this, Lu Qing was speechless. He was filled with emotions. God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan had spent 20 years to break free from his confinement and shackles. He had a unique understanding of the 9 moves saber techniques that truly belonged to him. Qian Donglu, on the other hand, had created 3 new moves in less than half a year. New moves that could be used against Dragon King were as easy as picking up cabbages from the market. Furthermore, similar incidents were happening all the time. This was also why Qian Donglu's martial arts talent was unique in this world. It was also why he was known as the one in 1,000 years. Chen Qitao listened quietly before replying slowly, "Mastery in one's work, and waste in complexity. Despite all the changes, the original is still the same." "This one is in my hands," Qian Donglu chuckled. His body suddenly swayed, rising and falling with the wind. His surroundings came to life, no longer as rigid as before. Instead, they were filled with the interest of nature. At this moment, he seemed to have become one with heaven and earth. At this moment, he had transformed from Qian Donglu into warrior sage. Even though Dragon King's aura was soaring to the heavens and rolling waves of heat, he was repelled. After staring at each other in silence for a while, Qian Donglu slowly raised his right hand. Under the afternoon sun, it glowed faintly like white jade. "The first move, Sky Splitter, is like the splitting of the heavens," Qian Donglu said slowly. At this moment, the referee seemed to have coordinated with him and announced, "Begin." Bam! Warrior Sage's palm struck down. Bright electric arcs instantly formed, twisting and thickening, like a crack in the heavens. This sky splitter engulfed the surroundings, including Qian Donglu's figure, and struck down with the same emotionless force of all things. At the same time, two high-voltage wires snapped, swinging away rapidly as if they were being pulled. The ends of the wires ejected silvery white and exaggerated electric arcs, transforming into whips that lashed at Chen Qitao. BZZT, BZZT, BZZT. Affected by this, 8 electric snakes sprang up in the form of pythons and pounced at Qian Donglu from all directions. If not for the gaps in the electric arcs, no one would have been able to avoid them at the speed of light. In a short moment, Dragon King was ambushed from all sides. Apart from the soles of his feet, he was attacked from all directions. It seemed that he had no choice but to face the attacks head-on and break through first. That was what Chen Qitao did, but he didn't choose the relatively weaker 8 electric pythons, nor did he consider the silvery white long whips, which were limited by the speed of the falling wires. Bam! The ground beneath his feet cracked open, lava gushing out, and scorching air rising, propelling him through the encirclement of the electric pythons and long whips. He clenched his fist and struck upwards. He was attacking Qian Donglu's strongest point. A heavy purple blanket, the high temperature distorting the air current, struck the descending sky splitter. Boom! The silvery white and lavender colors were like exploding fireworks. They were extremely dazzling and scattered downwards, almost drenching Lu Cheng and the others. A jade-white palm appeared and struck Qian Donglu's tightly clenched fingers. Warrior Sage Qian Donglu's vanished figure reappeared and was thrown diagonally upwards. He did a somersault in mid-air and descended at a much faster speed than normal, as though something on the ground was pulling him. Electricity generates magnetism. Magnetism is different. Bam! At that moment, Qian Donglu transformed into a bolt of lightning and struck towards Chen Qitao's head, who was having trouble changing directions in midair. In such a situation, he might not be able to dodge if he hastily ignited the flame force in his body. But just as Qian Donglu was about to land, a gust of wind blew, changing Dragon King's direction and gliding to the ground. This was a hurricane created by the large difference in temperature. This was the hidden variation of Chen Qitao's punch. Fire generates wind, and wind fuels fire. He had used the unique skills of the fire sect to great effect. Seeing Dragon King avoid the attack and land steadily, Lu Qing couldn't help but praise, "Cool." Immediately after, he realized that Chen Qitao was about to take a step. Regardless of whether Chen Qitao could hear him or react in time, he quickly shouted, "Jump." If a high-voltage wire was placed in that area, one would be electrocuted if they took a step forward. At that moment, he had to pretend that he had consumed the half-step crazy smile. Dragon King seemed to be taking a step, but he wasn't. He leaped and changed his position, avoiding the electric shock. He had fought with Qian Donglu many times. Qian Donglu had often conducted sneak attacks by channeling electricity into the ground. He had long been at a disadvantage. Seeing this, Lu Qing heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he realized that Ning Zitong, Lu Yan, and Guojia were looking at him strangely. Cough. He cleared his throat and returned his gaze to the battlefield. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen other people's fans?" Chapter 665. Missing his target, the warrior sage, Qian Donglu, suddenly hovered in midair. He didn't descend as expected, as though there was an invisible rope for him to step on, or the peak of the mountain was pushing him up. His sleeves fluttered as he looked at the Dragon King, Chen Qitao, who had changed his position, and laughed. The crack of the heavens can be mended, but the calamity of man cannot be saved. Just as he finished his sentence, he plummeted like an eagle pouncing on its prey. Ferocious, fast, and sharp. His 2 hands, which were curved into claws, contained disc-like electric arcs that grew petal by petal. How could Chen Qitao just stand there and let him attack? He immediately shifted his steps and turned his body, stirring up gusts of wind in the air. Wherever he was close to the ground, he would change his stride into a leap to avoid being affected. A pounce followed by a pause. There seemed to be an elastic rope tied to Qian Donglu's back that allowed him to swing up and down in midair. Sometimes he pounced, sometimes he was lifted. No one knew when the lightning would strike or where it would strike. This forced Chen Qitao to constantly change his position, allowing him to be completely manipulated. The warrior sage made full use of the magnetic field to gain the supernatural ability of flight. Normally, he would have had to undergo a long battle and change the environment to achieve this in other places. At this moment, he seemed to be in an undefeatable position. Locked in by his aura, Chen Qitao couldn't free his hands to attack the air. He had to be on guard against his opponent's thunderous attack. If he was distracted by other things, he might reveal his flaws. Amidst the undulations, Chen Qitao moved to a certain area. A talisman inscribed with green jade and silver lightning suddenly appeared in Qian Donglu's eyes. BZZT BZZT BZZT. At the point where the high-voltage wires were connected to the ground, the electric arcs that had been dispersed by the peak of the mountain were suddenly triggered. They soared upwards like a blooming sunflower. They formed a cage, trapping the Dragon King, Chen Qitao. They kept shrinking towards the center, as though trying to envelop him. At this moment, Qian Donglu fell rapidly as though he was being pulled by the ground. He finally unleashed the thunderous attack that had been hanging in everyone's hearts. He bent his 10 fingers and extended them forward. He locked onto his opponent from afar and shot out lightning snakes one after another. Amidst the closing petals of the electric sunflower, Chen Qitao used the same trick again. He stomped his feet and soared into the sky. His fists were like gushing purple lava, roaring towards Qian Donglu. His legs were trembling slightly, and his trousers were making crackling sounds. To a certain extent, he was affected by the arc of light and was affected by it. Just as the previous collision was about to repeat, Qian Donglu seemed to be pushed by an invisible hand on the mountaintop. He leaped over Chen Qitao's dragon-like fist and appeared above him. Pa! Qian Donglu stretched out his left leg and kicked at the back of his opponent's head with lightning snakes coiling around it, taking advantage of the opponent's weakness when he was at the end of his moves. The fish flies in shallow water, and the eagle soars in the sky. Lu Qing sucked in a breath of cold air and didn't even blink. If it were him, there would be no way to salvage the situation. Suddenly, a faint purple fireball condensed behind Chen Qitao's head, but it instantly disintegrated. Boom! The rolling waves of flames were inseparable. They either supported Qian Donglu's feet or slapped at Dragon King's head. The former bounced off as if he had stepped on a spring. Dragon King extended his neck and allowed the flames to hit him, taking advantage of the upward momentum and bulging muscles. After the initial frenzy, the flames seemed to have turned into little snakes, swimming docilely on Dragon King's head and body. He looked majestic, as if the real Emperor Yan had reappeared. This move originated from 9 rotations of 5 flames. Descent of the Sun. Lu Cheng was amazed. I've only just started on the path of controlling flames. Just as he was thinking, Warrior Sage, who had been sent flying by the shockwave, turned around and clapped his palms together. There wasn't a trace of smoke or fire, as if he had planned for this combo all along. Boom! A thunderclap in the clear sky shook Lu Cheng and the rest, who were watching from afar. On the battlefield, Dragon King, who had yet to land, was even more visibly shaken. Pa! Qian Donglu pulled his palms apart and pulled out a thin blade of purple light. Like real lightning, it struck Chen Qitao as soon as it appeared. The 9th move of the Thunder sect, thunder from a clear sky. Cloudless Thunder Blade. Against this move, if one didn't notice it and avoid it beforehand, there was no way they could dodge it. In terms of speed, it was far superior to Flying Dragon takedown of Xinji's sect and Lu Yongyuan's Extreme Lightning. In the blink of an eye, from Chen Qitao's left cheek to his neck to his right chest, a hideous, charred wound appeared. There were still traces of electric snakes swimming inside, causing him to fall into an uncontrollable paralysis and fall to the ground like a stone. This cloudless thunder blade had unparalleled speed, but it didn't have the power that came with it. It could only hurt like high-voltage electric arcs. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to reach such speed. Retracting his chi and blood and restraining the paralysis, Dragon King didn't panic. He methodically used force concentration to dispel the remaining effects on his body. Before his feet touched the ground, Qian Donglu was pulled down by the ground again and struck down. This time, the sky was gloomy and dark clouds gathered. Bolts of silver-white electric snakes leaped among them, growing stronger and stronger. Boom! 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 Thick bolts of lightning struck down like water washing the ground. Accompanied by the martial saint's repeated strikes and leaps, Chen Qitao was tired of dealing with them. His hair stood on end and his body trembled intermittently. However, these intervals were getting shorter and shorter. With the advantage of his home ground, he finally gained the upper hand and firmly suppressed his opponent. In such a heavenly tribulation, Chen Qitao didn't panic. He was injured but didn't fall. He responded with heavy purple flames and ferocious blast punches, sending sparks and electric arcs in all directions. The temperature of the surroundings rose and more than half of the battlefield showed signs of drying up. Even from a distance, Lu Qing could feel the heat when he breathed, almost burning his chi passage. This was the chi passage of a fire sect physical invulnerability expert, one that had been honed multiple times in the volcano laboratory. If it had been a martial artist below the inhuman stage, he would have been severely injured and on the verge of death, unless he stopped breathing. Mirage, suffocating hell. Lu Qing muttered thoughtfully. This was the 8th move of the fire sect. It mainly changed the environment to create a high-temperature space that was advantageous to the user. It made it difficult for the opponent to breathe and create visual differences due to the density of the air. It also affected the movement of the organs and the ability to think due to the scorching air. This was an indiscriminate damage. However, martial artists who were good at controlling fire and had been honed in the volcano laboratory were like fish in water. Even if they were more powerful, they would be less affected than their opponent if they exceeded the limits. Beside him, Lu Yan's lips quivered as he said softly, "Dragon King is making use of this to slowly turn the situation around. He is also destroying the surrounding environment to weaken his home ground advantage and pave the way for the rest of you." Lu Qing nodded in realization. Shortly after, he had a question. If this goes on, will the clothes ignite on their own and burn to ashes? At that time, the scene would be too beautiful to look at. Lu Yan tilted his head and gave him an odd look. Our martial arts suits have been reinforced with fireproof materials. The Shangqing sect should have done the same. How could he not know such common sense? Haha. Lu Qing laughed dryly. So that's how it is. Can't you allow me to be a martial arts fanatic for the next few months? After a fierce battle, the temperature of the ground rose rapidly. Qian Donglu's descending and leaping movements were no longer as effortless as before. However, he could still borrow the momentum to fly high and fall naturally. Along with the lightning spat out by the dark clouds, wave after wave, the 9 heavens united. Chen Qitao was on the verge of collapsing. Tiny electric snakes slithered on the surface of his skin as the power of his punches and kicks weakened. Suddenly, his movements slowed. Qian Donglu immediately turned into a bolt of lightning and struck mercilessly. Against the backdrop of the dark clouds and dancing lightning snakes, he went straight for his opponent's vitals. Without a sound, Chen Qitao swung his left fist to the side. Layers and layers of purple flames covered his fist, making it unimaginably heavy. It actually caused the martial saint in mid-air to change his direction and collide with it. Bzzz. The purple flames didn't dissipate and stuck firmly to Qian Donglu's palm. Meanwhile, the lonely light drilled into Chen Qitao's body, electrifying him. Amidst the trembling, Chen Qitao raised his right arm as though he was prepared. His 5 fingers clenched into an empty fist, as though he had covered an area and grasped the surrounding nature. Looking from afar, Lu Qing had the feeling that the area was completely isolated. Heaven and earth were turned upside down and nothing was left unscathed. In a situation where he couldn't turn the tables, Chen Qitao chose to exchange injury for victory and retaliate forcefully. Restrictions Sect, Clear Jade Chapter. Chapter 666. Clenching his fist, Chen Qitao's palm was empty. The faint purple and crimson flames behind him merged into his fist. This punch was connected to the 9 rotations of 5 flames, descent of the sun. If he wanted to unleash its full power, he would need to incorporate the faint purple, blazing white, light blue, golden, and crimson fireballs. However, in his haste, the Dragon King chose to reduce the number of fireballs so that Qian Donglu wouldn't have a chance to break free. As the punch landed, the surroundings turned dark. All light seemed to have been sucked dry. A vast and boundless aura burst forth, making Chen Qitao look like a deity, capable of overturning the heavens with a flip of his hand. Even from afar, Lu Qing felt like he was the only one left in this world. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to face it head-on. This punch seems to have strengthened the mental aspect. Different from most physical invulnerability moves and pure mental secret arts, it's more like God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan's final move, Eternal Silence. However, it's obviously more profound, powerful, and terrifying. This thought came to Lu Qing as he pondered. Could it be that the taboo is to fully develop one's mental realm and control one's brain? When that happens, reality and illusion will fly together, and both matter and mind will be balanced. While he was floating in the air, the martial saint reacted. He used Chen Qitao's left fist as a support point, and with a shake of his wrist, he flew backwards, forcibly pulling his opponent forward by 1 step. It was this step that made the Dragon King, who was near the contact point of the rupture of the high-voltage wire, feel an electric current flowing through his legs. Trembling, Qian Donglu's descending fist slowed down. Taking advantage of his opponent's pull, Qian Donglu pounced like an eagle, his right hand clenched into a fist and struck his opponent's wrist diagonally, avoiding the point of contact. During this process, his eyes lit up like lightning. The crown on his head fell apart, and his hair spread out like needles. Countless silvery white strands swam through his hair. It was a long story, but in reality, it was a change of pulling and pouncing. Qian Donglu didn't hastily respond with a big move of the same level. Instead, he went back to basics, using the simplest of punches and kicks to neutralize and counter, turning something rotten into something magical. With this move alone, he lived up to his title as the warrior sage. Boom! In an instant, the airflow expanded and swept outwards violently. Lu Qing, Lu Yan, and the rest felt their vision go dark. When the light returned, they saw that Qian Donglu's right arm was bent at an odd angle, with bones protruding from his skin. It was a hair-raising sight. The Dragon King, on the other hand, was spasming visibly from his right wrist. The closer it was to his wrist, the more intense the spasms were. His left fist, which had absorbed Qian Donglu's heavy purple flames, dissipated, but Qian Donglu managed to grab hold of the last bit of strength. The goshawk flew backward and then charged forward. It was as if there was an invisible rope between the warrior sage and the Dragon King. In the background, several drones in charge of broadcasting were affected by electromagnetic waves and heat waves. They were either directly damaged or malfunctioned and fell to the ground. Pulling on the rope, Qian Donglu tightened his body in midair, lowered his waist and shoulders, and crashed into Chen Qitao's chest like a meteorite. Crack! Although the Dragon King hurriedly retracted his left arm, expanded his chest and abdomen muscles, and ignited a thin fire shield, he was still knocked out of his stance. His joints were bent and his chest bones were broken. Bang! He flew backward, his back colliding with a high-voltage electric pole. He broke the pole and flew up, tearing apart several wires. BZZT BZZT BZZT. The high voltage penetrated the air and drew out electric arcs, creating a scene of fireworks in midair. With a successful move, Qian Donglu's feet finally landed on the ground. He lowered his waist, bounced up, and appeared beside Chen Qitao. He was so fast that it was like a flash of lightning, arriving at almost the same time as the sound of breaking air. This speed was only slower than the transient steps. The fourth style of the Thunder sect, Swift Thunder. If not for his injuries, the warrior sage could also exceed the speed of sound with his full strength. This was why the warrior sage was called the warrior sage. He could quickly pick up, master, and come up with new ideas. He was different from his predecessors. Once he understood something, he would be able to understand it all. Almost all the martial artists of the same generation as him had tasted despair. Bang! Amidst the explosion, Qian Donglu's already charred and tattered white robe was torn apart. He shook his left hand, turned his fist into a palm, and pressed forward. The green lightning in his palm formed a talisman, like a seal of thunder, containing a sense of danger and terror. The fifth style of the Thunder sect, Universal Green Book. This move was mainly used for paralysis. It could mix lightning into a thunderball and create an explosive force in the electric shock. More frightening was that it could affect and manipulate the lightning of the natural world and the enemy to a certain extent. Don't fight Shangqing sect physical invulnerability experts in thunderstorms. Don't fight Shangqing sect disciples unless there's a difference in realm and level. These were the two universally recognized rules in the Chinese martial arts circle and even the entire world's supernatural realm. Back then, Vagar took advantage of the fact that he was close to physical invulnerability and stronger than Peng Liyun to launch a surprise attack to break the prejudices of his predecessors. In the end, not only was he heavily injured, but he also helped Peng Liyun make the great leap. Bang! Qin Chitao's expression was resolute. He didn't admit defeat. Even though his sternum was almost completely broken, it didn't stop him from punching with his right fist, using Emperor Yan against Green Book. At the same time, his broken left arm drooped down. With a shake of his shoulder, he used the injured area like a whip, whipping out a cluster of purple flames that burned close to the ground. It swam silently, but danger lurked within. Bang, bang, bang. The warrior sage and dragon king kept switching positions, engaging in close-range combat. At times, the purple lightning and green lightning would increase, and at other times, the flames would wreak havoc. If Dragon King was below the inhuman stage, he wouldn't be far from death. Even at the inhuman stage, he would have lost most of his combat ability. However, he was still fighting hard, repeatedly using force concentrations. There wasn't a hint of pain on his face, as though he had lost his senses. A few minutes later, both of them reached their maximum speed. Their figures separated again. Qin Chitao crashed through 3 high-voltage electric poles and landed outside the designated battlefield. Qian Donglu's hair was messy and smoking. There were several wounds on his body. Purple flames danced in his mangled flesh, turning the surroundings pitch black. The referee stood in the distance, raised his right hand, and shouted, "The warrior sage wins." Qin Chitao took a deep breath. Finally, a pained expression appeared on his face. Frowning, he extended his right hand and realigned his bones, connecting them one by one so that the terrifying recovery ability of a physical invulnerability expert could take effect. Turning around, he straightened his back in his tattered navy blue martial arts suit and walked towards the away team seats. Lu Cheng, on the other hand, had already stood up when the referee announced the result. "Your opponent is him," said Qin Chitao in a deep voice, flames dancing in his eyes. Lu Cheng realized that he had subconsciously moved to the side in an attempt to welcome Dragon King. He didn't enter the arena, and directly started the second round. At this very moment, Qian Donglu was realigning his bones with great familiarity. Although this wouldn't allow him to recover immediately, it would at least lessen the pain and not affect the rest of the match. "Yeah, I have to hurry. I can't give the warrior sage more time to heal." Lu Cheng retracted his gaze and raised his right hand, as though he was going to high-five Dragon King before rushing to the battlefield. But do physical invulnerability experts need high-fives and cheers? Isn't this too childish and naive? This didn't seem to happen in the past. While Lu Cheng was hesitating, Qin Chitao walked past him slowly and suddenly said, "Beat him." His tone was deep and dignified. "Okay." Lu Cheng blurted out. He turned and walked to the center of the arena, carefully avoiding the fallen high-voltage electric poles. Qian Donglu's right arm hung limply, but his body wasn't floating in the air. He stood there, looking devastated, but leisurely, smiling as he waited for his opponent to approach. Lu Cheng's heartbeat quickened. This was a 1-in-1,000 years martial arts genius. Other than the taboo Mighty One, he was the man closest to that domain, a terrifying Mighty One who had traumatized many physical and vulnerability experts. The scariest thing was that he was only 33 years old. He was at the peak of his mental, physical, and experience. This peak could last for at least another 10 or even 15 years. The shadow of the warrior sage would cast a shadow over several generations of Mighty Ones. Of course, he might break through in a few years and stop playing with kids. Even if he was severely injured, no one dared to look him in the eye. Can I beat him? Can I really beat him? For a moment, Lu Cheng was nervous. His heart was pounding, and his body couldn't help but tremble. If the Dragon King was his idol, then the warrior sage was the ultimate opponent in his childhood fantasies. Am I finally going to face him? Unlike the relaxed feeling he had when he drew the same piece in the master battle, or at least pretended to be relaxed, Lu Cheng's palms were hot and his forehead was sweating. If he lost that time, so be it. But this time, if he lost, Longhu might lose the title of world #1 this year. At this thought, Lu Cheng stood in his position and visualized the ice heart. He calmed his emotions and allowed himself to look down from above. Qian Donglu glanced at him. Before the referee raised his hand, he smiled and said, "It's a pity that I have to fight you under such circumstances. But I've created a left-handed saber technique. It's suitable for this situation." Left-handed saber technique? Do you have to be so free? If you weren't so free, you would have long been banned. Lu Cheng didn't restrain his urge to complain. After this, he felt a little more relaxed. He was no longer facing an invincible scourge. At this moment, Peng Lian sat up straight. Yan Shaoling and the rest, who were watching the match, clenched their fists. At this moment, Yan Zhika, who had already woken up, Lin Kei, who was recuperating at home, and Kai Zhongming, who was commenting, all focused on the screen. At this moment, the referee raised his right hand and shouted, "Round 2, begin." Lu Cheng's first match against the warrior sage, Qian Donglu, began. Chapter 667. As soon as the referee finished his sentence, Lu Cheng gathered the faint purple fireball he had prepared earlier. It circled around him like a satellite that could attack and defend on its own. This short moment wasn't enough to complete the 5 flames. He could only choose one of them. This complemented the still high temperature in the surroundings. Qian Donglu watched from afar with a smile on his face. He raised his left palm, straightened it into a blade, and slashed at Lu Cheng. Bam! With this slash, his entire body moved. Silvery white threads leaped out from his body, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. In Lu Cheng's eyes, there seemed to be only the thunder blade left in the world. It flickered and swam left and right, like a fish swimming in a clear river, or a ray of moonlight reflected in the waves. It was either natural or ethereal, making it hard to tell where it would slash at. Lu Cheng's thoughts whirled and fell. He didn't have absolute confidence, but under the guidance of the god looking down at him and the clear reflection of the ice heart, he calmly chose to dodge. Bam! He stepped on the ground, twisted his waist, and swept out. Since the high-voltage wires were in contact with the ground, he naturally wouldn't choose a spot near them. Just as he moved, the thunder blades suddenly brightened. No longer flickering or wandering, it was activated and locked onto Lu Cheng, dragging a long trail of light as it slashed at the spot where Lu Cheng was about to appear. Seeing that he was about to be hit, Lu Cheng, who had been prepared, detonated the Emperor Yen force hidden in his aperture acupoints. Boom! Carrying the faint purple fireball, he seemed to have been pushed by someone out of thin air. His horizontal movement turned into a backward drift. Bam! Lu Cheng was vaguely stimulated, his hair standing on end. The thunder blade brushed past his body and hit the ground not far away, creating a long, charred ravine with tiny electric snakes jumping around. Qian Donglu's figure reappeared. He turned around without a trace of anger, his gaze once again locked onto Lu Cheng, who had just landed. Thump. 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 Dragging his limp right arm, he floated forward. With every step he took, he grew taller, like the saying in ancient stories, grow with the wind. After 3 steps, the leisurely warrior sage transformed into a terrifying giant over 2 meters tall, covered in thunder tattoos. Zzz. Purple lightning and green thunder appeared around his body at the same time. It was like a strange old tree or a human skeleton. In a condescending manner, he chopped his left palm vertically. At this moment, Peng Liyun, Guojia, and the others who were at the edge of the battlefield felt as if they were being punished by the heavens, and they were directly facing the mighty, fierce, and overbearing tribulation of lightning. They couldn't help but feel timid and tremble with fear, as if they were the 1,000-year-old locust trees in the folklore, beings of extreme een. Pa. Qian Donglu seemed to have become the celestial lord who ruled over the Thunder sect. As his palm struck down, everyone felt a heavy weight on their bodies and minds. The purple lightning that was generated continued to dance, as though it was brewing up various changes. It was both real and illusory, with a hidden trump card. This blade was derived from the 6th style of the Thunder sect, the purple seal of the celestial venerable. It was supported by spiritual suppression, and it was extremely righteous, young, and firm. The lightning tribulation was ferocious, and its power was terrifying. Once it came into contact, all 9 tribulations would fall. When Qian Donglu was close to him, Lu Cheng had been observing him. However, he still couldn't grasp the one hidden by his opponent. He couldn't determine what his final change would be. Even with the ice heart reflection, he could only understand the objective situation. He couldn't synthesize the information and make the most accurate judgment in an instant. When the warrior sage transformed into the celestial lord of the Thunder sect and suppressed his heart and mind, he finally made a decision. It wasn't too early, but it wasn't too late either. His enemy heart freezing move was crystal clear and solid. Under the might of the thunder tribulation, only a few cracks appeared. This allowed Lu Cheng to not need the confrontation formula or the forwarding formula and not be affected by fear. He calmly moved his shoulders, straightened his knees, and dodged to the side. At the same time, he stirred up a ferocious gust of wind that slammed towards Qian Donglu. However, at this moment, it was as though there was an invisible rope between him and Qian Donglu. The moment he changed directions, the connection tightened. Together with the warrior sage, the distance between them decreased instead of increasing. Pa! Qian Donglu's heavy left palm suddenly sped up. Purple lightning gathered, illuminating the surroundings that seemed to be the calm before the storm. A thick bolt of lightning suddenly appeared between the heavens and earth. At this moment, Lu Cheng had no choice but to ignite the small amount of Emperor Yen force in his body. In an instant, he changed directions and flew diagonally, making a strange turn. Bam! Purple lightning swept across, stirring up smoke and dust on the ground. It was bare and cracked. Qian Donglu didn't raise his arm again. Shifting his center of gravity, he moved his body first and pounced towards Lu Cheng, who had yet to land on the ground. His left palm landed behind him, like a long saber being dragged forward. The tip of the saber rubbed against the ground at high speed, creating a series of sparks. The appearance of the sparks ignited the already hot air in the surroundings. Whoosh! Within a radius of 20 to 30 meters, a single spark started a prairie fire. Crimson flames roiled as Qian Donglu's saber leaped towards Lu Cheng, who was in midair. Since ancient times, lightning strikes were often followed by fire. The Shangqing sect had deep knowledge in this aspect. The third move of the Thunder sect was called Divine Golden Flames. Other than being an explosive technique to squeeze out one's potential, it was also the study of lightning strikes and fire burns. At this moment, Qian Donglu had cleverly used the fire sect battle environment created by the Dragon King. Crack! The flames in midair burned through two high-voltage wires. They swung downwards, dragging bright electric arcs that pierced through the air. They whipped towards Lu Qing from both sides. At this critical juncture, Lu Qing took a deep breath and ignited the second stage. Boom! With the explosion of some Emperor Yen force, he changed his original direction and retreated rapidly, avoiding the whip of thunder punishment and most of the flames. The remaining crimson flames flowed over his head, his skin, and his clothes. However, the violence and scorching heat were restrained, like the rain falling in the spring of March. At this moment, Qian Donglu suddenly paused. He gathered all his momentum at his waist and sank into the ground. Following which, with a loud bang, his body swung up. Against the cracked ground, he flashed to Lu Cheng's side at lightning speed, taking advantage of the fact that Lu Cheng had almost exhausted all his moves and was in mid-air, where it was difficult for him to exert his strength. Accompanied by the explosive wind, Qian Donglu straightened his left palm and chopped forward. The rising silvery white light made Lu Cheng's eyes sparkle. Lu Cheng couldn't care less. He turned sideways, swung his arm, clenched his fist and hammered downwards. The faint purple fireball around him whizzed out. Bzzzt. Qian Donglu's palm vibrated mysteriously. Like a hot knife cutting butter, he silently split the faint purple fireball into two halves. The halves fell to the surroundings and then exploded. After the split, he used up all his momentum and retreated with the force of the rebound, causing Lu Cheng's fist to hit empty air. Bam! The moment he retreated, he stomped on the ground with his right foot. Like a spring that had been compressed to its limit, he fiercely slammed his body sideways. This was a variation of the second chop. The palm was the knife, the body was the knife. The small knife broke the defense, while the long knife took the life. Just by looking at these few moves, Qian Donglu was a master in the way of the knife. He wasn't much weaker than the god-slaying knife, Lu Yongyuan. To him, the principles of martial arts were interconnected. A knife sage was a knife sage, a sword sage was a sword sage, and a fist sage was a fist sage. He was the warrior sage of the present age. The figure in front of Lu Cheng grew larger. Without time to do anything else, he pulled up his arm and formed an ice wall beside him. Bam! Amidst the loud collision, there was a cracking sound. Lu Cheng, who didn't have a foothold in midair, flew backwards and crashed into a high-voltage electric pole. The pole broke. Lu Cheng's butterfly muscles on his back bulged as he borrowed the force of the collision. In a flash, he nimbly changed his direction and landed in another position. He put his feet together to avoid the electric shock. His arms and the sides of his body were unusually sore. If he hadn't formed the ice wall in time to offset the pain, they would have been fractured. However, Qian Donglu didn't follow him around and launch another powerful attack as he expected. Instead, he paused for a moment to catch his breath. This made Lu Qing feel as if a bolt of lightning had struck his mind, illuminating the dark fog. He came to his senses and realized that he had made a big mistake just now. In the face of a once-in-a-thousand-years genius, the warrior sage of the current generation, and a top-notch expert whose name had resounded in his ears for almost a decade, he had instinctively chosen the cautious approach of minimizing mistakes. He would rather avoid the attack than take the risk. This had nothing to do with emotions or cowardice, so it wasn't within the range of the enemy heart-freezing move. As a result, it had boosted Qian Donglu's momentum and allowed him to freely display his martial arts skills. He had completely avoided the situation where he was heavily injured and his right arm was broken. No, I have to pressure him and make him reveal his current condition. Avoiding the attack was equivalent to disarming himself. He was heavily injured and couldn't use his right arm. He had lost many of his home ground advantages. Why couldn't he go head-to-head and finish him off while he was down? He was human too. He had lost a match before, especially after a fierce battle. What was there to worry about? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Lu Qing swung his arm, clenched his fist, and punched forward. At the same time, all the pores on his back spewed out tiny flames. They penetrated his clothes and propelled him dozens of meters away like a rocket. He punched the face of the warrior sage, Qian Donglu, who always gave people the impression of laziness. Come on, I'm not afraid of you. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.